Recording
We
in
are
progress.
broadcasting live on YouTube and via Zoom, but not on channel 77 for tonight's agenda item. It will be available on channel 77 as a replay item, but if you want to watch it live, please go over to YouTube channel or Zoom. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence all phones and beepers, if you still have one. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 board members are present, an applicant may request to be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the City Commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom, actually, it's not a quasi-judicial, so you don't have to be visible to the court reporter or you don't have to be sworn in. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to the city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of August 14, 2024 to order. The time is 6:02. Jill, if you please call the roll.
Robert Behar.
Here.
Julio Gabriel.
Here.
Zuka Valencia.
Here.
Felix Pardo.
Here.
Javier Salman. Here. Chip Withers. ABS and staff.
Here. Tonight we'll have no swearing in on the 2 items because, as I said before, they're not quasi-judicial. Everyone who wishes to speak this evening must complete the roster on the podium, please. We ask that you print your name clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open their chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. First, we have the approval of the minutes of July 10th, 2024. Has everybody had a chance to read those?
I move.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any comments? No? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel.
Here.
Zuka Valencia.
Here. Yes.
Felix Pardo.
Yes.
Javier Salman.
Yes.
Chip Withers.
Yes.
Robert Behar.
Yes.
ABS and staff.
Yes. One question, if I may, Craig. I was not here and Robert was not here at the last meeting. We're allowed to vote yes on those minutes,
Correct.
even though we didn't participate.
I read the minutes,
Correct, you are allowed to.
I just want to clarify that for the record.
and I read that my friend here, Chip Withers, wanted me to be present. Thank you.
Thank you. The procedure we'll use for tonight, first we'll have the identification of the agenda item by Mr. Caller. Then we'll have presentation by applicant or agent, which in this case will be staff. Then I'll go ahead and open it for public comment. First in chamber, then I'll do Zoom platform and the phone line platform. Afterwards, we'll go ahead and close public comment, board discussion, a motion discussion, and second of a motion if needed, and the board's final comments and a vote. As I said before at the beginning, just to let everybody know that we're broadcasting live on YouTube and on Zoom, but not on channel 77. There's some technical difficulties going on with that, but it will be replayed there afterwards. Mr. Caller?
Item E1, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 5, Architecture, Section 5-200, Mediterranean Standards, Article 3, Uses, Section 3-402, restrictions related to location and Article 16 definitions to enhance the quality of Coral Gables Mediterranean design by requiring a conceptual design review, removing duplicative criteria, relocating inapplicable standards, supplementing existing criteria, and including additional Mediterranean building examples, providing for severability, repeal, or codification for an effective date. Item E1, public hearing.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Good evening, Jennifer Garcia, planning official. I apologize, I'm a little under the weather, so my voice can be a little cracky and low. Can I have a PowerPoint, please? Thank you. Okay, so just as a little refresher, as you know, Mediterranean architecture that we refer to as now has been part of the vision of George Merrick for Coral Gables for almost 1 century so far. So it dates back to the original Warranty D, which is the little image on the left side, which stated basically that all buildings, except for those that are in the thematic villages of Coral Gables, shall have Spanish style, Venetian, Moorish, Italian, or similarly harmonious, looking at you, Craig, harmonious types of architecture. And that was later implemented into the zoning code, the first zoning code of Coral Gables in 1930. And then in the post-war period, the original vision of George Merrick kind of was pushed aside, I guess, in favor of more, in favor of trends of the time at the mid-century, until the 1980s, when the city decided to implement the Mediterranean bonus in 1986, actually, with the intent to encourage Mediterranean architecture in our city. And that first was limited to just the CBD and the North Ponce area, so more of our urban core. A year later, in 1987, they expanded that to include the Biltmore Way area, as well as the area south of the CBD down to, I think, University Drive, so that more or less that downtown area that we have. And a few years later, in the early 1990s, that expanded to be citywide, that you could use and utilize the Med bonus. So now we have actually areas in our city that are mandating Mediterranean architecture, and that's in the old industrial area, which is now being rebranded as the Design Innovation District. Hidalgo Plaza, the 100 block of Hidalgo, as well as the RIR, the residential regulations, and MF4 and MF3 zoning districts. So in those areas, in those zoning districts, you have to build Mediterranean architecture. So I should go back. So what we're looking at today, let me go back really quick. What we're looking at today is not just for Med bonus, to get an actual bonus from the Board of Architects, but it's to have better criteria and better standards for these parts of the city that actually mandate this style of architecture. So the Med bonus has been amended many times since the 1980s, and most recently it was amended a couple years ago thanks to the Blue Ribbon Committee to require that the style has to be Mediterranean. They took out the other styles, so it has to be Mediterranean, and also provide a conceptual design review that's optional. This initiative to revise the standards for Mediterranean design is kind of piggybacking off of that Blue Ribbon Committee and their ideas. We reviewed it with the Board of Architects, literally line by line, criterion by criterion, for many months. I think back last fall, 2023. Then we've been, meeting with you guys at the City Commission, obviously, to update them and to have a presentation so they understand what we've been working on. So now we're at the beginning phases of the adoption process, looking for recommendation from this board to move forward to the commission. So the goal, as stated already in the ordinance itself, is to provide incentives and to encourage Mediterranean architecture. So right now, the standards are a little subjective. They're a little repetitive because a lot of them are about windows and doors facing the street, which is part of the underlying zoning right now anyway. So the intent of this is to make something that's a little more rigid, a little more clear, more about architecture and about Mediterranean architecture style specifically. So you'll recognize the building on University in Ponce. The first rendition of that building on the left side was fought hard by the residents. They did not like it. And it changed a lot in the architecture. Same requests of change of land use and zoning, same zoning changes, same alley vacation, replat, all that. The obvious difference, the biggest difference here is architecture changed. And that's when the residents came out to city commission meetings and requested that the city commission approve the project. So architecture is very important, right, in our city. So development review process. This is a very heavy slide. I hope we can understand it. The first flow chart is kind of the by right. What Coral Gables has is by right. DRC, Development Review Committee, Board of Architects preliminary review, and then to building permit. But as you know, this is very rarely ever used. Most site plans do require city commission approval. And that, of course, starts with DRC, and it involves the Board of Architects. However, most of the buildings that you see as a board are accompanied with a change of land use or zoning. And so the Board of Architects is not approving that change of land use and zoning. They're not part of that process. They're part of the site plan approval process. They're approving the architecture. They're approving the aesthetics. They're not part of the change of land use and the change of zoning. They're just there reviewing the site plan because they're part of it. But because our city encourages change of land use and zoning to be accompanied with a site plan, it usually travels together. So it travels from DRC, the Board of Architects, to this board, Planning and Zoning Board, and first and second reading with the commission. So again, the height difference is between who approves it, right? Board of Architects can only approve level 1, level 2 bonus. They can't approve a taller building that the land use and zone doesn't allow. They only approve those 2 bonuses, right? But at City Commission, they approve the land use and zoning changes. And that's usually what the residents are mostly concerned about, is that additional height as it jumps from low rise to high rise. That change is not from the med bonus. It's not from Board of Architects. It's from the land use and zoning changes that's approved by the City Commission. Just want to clarify that. So the summary of the proposed changes are pretty much the same that we've already discussed. It's about strengthening the purpose and the review process of the med bonus. It's also to remove the redundant criteria that we have already in our code. It's to move some certain criteria that's more appropriate in other areas, such as drive-throughs on certain streets are prohibited. Same thing with work co-shares, moving that to a more appropriate part of our code. It's also incorporating provisions from the Mediterranean Village Pad architectural standards that's in our Appendix C, expanding the list of example buildings, and then also including a character-defining feature list to help architects to incorporate features of architecture, features of Mediterranean architecture. So right now we have 8 example buildings in our zoning code. Probably the one that's used most often is the Biltmore. So there's a need to have better examples that are for larger sites, because that's really what our zoning code unfortunately encourages. So what's proposed today is to remove the San Sebastian Apartments. It's not seen as a exemplary building, and the same with the Granada Shop. Since there's not really good elevations and plans of that building, the Board of Architects kind of felt that wasn't an important precedent to keep. And replacing those 2 and adding on to the list, many buildings that you can recognize by our fine architects. Fine architects being the architects that we recognize, Martin Hampton, Schulten Weaver, the ones that really created the character of our city back in the 1920s. And then also some local examples. And then I think we've talked about this already. This Gaia, I think was added, as well as some other examples that are outside of South Florida and Spain and Palm Beach. And then since we've discussed this in May, I believe, we've added a few more examples in Spain, France, and the United Kingdom as well. And the long list of character-defining features, I don't want to go through that, but it's really just, stucco, towers, use of 2-piece barrel roof tiled, those types of features that you see on Mediterranean architecture. It's not really spelled out right now in our criteria. So we have a list of those character-defining features in our code for the architects to use and incorporate into their designs. So since we last met in May, we've addressed some of the comments that we received. We moved context analysis to be the very first criterion in the prerequisites table. We felt that was really important, as we discussed at the last meeting. That context is very, very important. Also, when you're designing a building for a site, usually look at the context first. It's kind of the first step. So it makes sense that it should be first. And then we kind of addressed some comments about the scale. So like I said, we expanded the context analysis and language to talk about site planning and how important that is as far as massing and building height and how any kind of conflict should be addressed and reviewed by the Board of Architects. Just kind of clarifying that language. And for the building scale, adding in some language about large-scale buildings having a more formal design, more refined design elements, and a smaller scale buildings having a little bit more asymmetrical forms. And you can see that very clearly with the Biltmore. The Biltmore is more of a classical formal-looking building. It has very defined design details versus the smaller Think building is a little more asymmetrical. It's a little more rustic on the spectrum of architecture. So again, the precedence is not granting any bonus at that time. It's really just meeting the criteria and being eligible, I guess, to apply for the level 1, level 2 med bonus. So we've updated some language for the facade composition, just kind of clarifying the language as far as base, middle, and top, and the importance of those 3 areas of the composition of facade. Kind of just using language that was already there and adding on to it. And that would be, so let me go back. So all of these 12, if you're multifamily, you have to complete 6 of the 12 of those requirements, or 8 of the 12 if you're mixed use. And that would grant you, if the Board of Architects feels like you've met that, right, that would grant you the level 1 bonus. And then level 2 bonus, there are 4. I don't think we talked about that very much last time. So there wasn't much update to that. But if they make all 4 of that, and the Board of Architects feels like it's in meeting criteria of that list, then they could make a motion to grant that med bonus for that building. I think that's it. Yes.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers signed up?
Present, we do have 2 speakers.
Okay. Could you call them, please?
Sure. Maria Cris Longo.
Good evening. My name is Maria Cristina Longo, and I live at 16 Phoenicia Avenue, and I'm going to speak in favor of the Med bonus revisions. The Mediterranean bonus was created as an incentive for developers to continue with the traditional Mediterranean theme that George Merrick started in the 1920s. Preserving this theme helps preserve our history and our character. George Merrick, the visionary and genius that he was, understood the importance for a city to have a distinctive and specific identity or branding. Having a cohesive theme creates value and a sense of place. Take a look at the history of Paris Haussmann's buildings. Paris' harmonious architecture is iconic. The problem is not the Med bonus. The problem is that developers and their lawyers request unreasonable change of zoning that impact people's lives in negative ways. The Med bonus only grants a total of 2 additional stories and just 18% additional FAR to a specific site when developers meet all the prerequisites and criteria for bonus 1 and 2. Eliminating the Med bonus is not the solution to increase density and height. Moreover, with the revised criteria, architects and developers will have to really perform to meet them. Why make the Med bonus standards more rigorous? Because this incentive has not produced consistently timeless and beautiful buildings that add value to our Mediterranean theme and our identity. About 2.5 years ago, the city created the Blue Ribbon Committee to improve the Med code due to understandable increased frustration by residents, including myself, with the outcome, with the product that the Med bonus was producing. The Blue Ribbon Committee was chaired by architect Felix Pardo, who now sits on this board. The Blue Ribbon Committee initiative was a great start. However, more needs to be done to make the code stricter by adding language that will produce timeless buildings like the new Ponce residence by Alan Morris that Jennifer showed you today. I was one of the individuals who fought the Alan Morris Ponce Residence project initial design wholeheartedly and with great passion, because the original design and style were not Mediterranean. After the BOA rejected the second version for the Ponce Residence, the Alan Morris team reached out to me to help them with the design concept. Two residents and I influenced significantly the final approved new design for the Ponce Residence that so many people love now. It was through this experience with the Alan Morris project that I realized that our Med bonus needed further enhancements. About a year and a half ago, the Coral Gables Planning Department retook a 2018 initiative to revise the Med bonus zoning code line by line. This comprehensive initiative to revise the Med bonus code has been managed by the Planning Department with the participation of the BOA and the city architect. Their goal simply has been to create more rigorous design parameters and guidelines for projects to qualify for the incentive. The ultimate goal has been to elevate the quality of design. That's the genuine and truthful goal, to increase the quality of design. I'm just going to give you a few examples of the new revisions, which are incredible. Now, the prerequisites are much more rigorous. And in the prerequisites, the first criteria, which I'm super happy about it, because it's always been my issue, they have developers, architects have to do a context analysis. That's number one. Another requirement is that it addresses the scale of the building. Another one is that requires a proportional analysis of buildings. One excellent requirement, which was brought up initially by the Blue Ribbon Committee, but now it's proposed to be mandatory, is the conceptual review. The conceptual review. And the list of images for precedent buildings used for inspiration have increased significantly. So there is more to draw inspiration from for architects. These comprehensive revisions are a win-win for everyone. The BOA wins because they will have legal grounds to reject poorly designed projects, and they will have higher standards to expect more. The mandatory conceptual review process will help residents like myself win, because bad projects that are not in context will be stopped in the initial stages, freeing citizens from the burden of having to organize to fight unreasonable projects. Also, developers win with the mandatory review process because they will get feedback early on before spending thousands of dollars on the developmental review process. The planning and the zoning board, you win because people will be happier and there will be less frustration with the outcome. Less people fighting to protect their quality of life. The city wins because beautiful, timeless architecture creates value. There's no doubt about that. Now, more than ever now, this is critically important that we keep and we improve it because of the Live Local Act. The Live Local Act is an incentive that does not have design parameters. We need our incentive with higher quality design parameters. Please, vote yes to approve the revisions that will increase our standards in architecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vinnie Torre?
Hello, Vinnie Torre, 208 Andalusia.
Welcome back, Vinny.
Thanks. My hope here is to kind of create a dialogue. I have a few things to say. They're not necessarily critiques, they're just things that I think I see, and some of these things we still, I think, need to chew on. I've been reviewing this for a little while. There's a few questions in the process, because we understand how things go here, and some of the implications that would come from this. So I've been sort of studying that kind of thing. I'm in favor of the improvements. I think we can always gain by having better architecture. It's just what are the implications and how do we get there? So one of the things that I was kind of thinking about, and I think I discussed this with Jennifer, she put on the board there on the screen a building that is quite higher than what the code allows by 3 or 4 stories, 5 stories. Maybe the zoning is for 4 or 5, and they came in with 9. So the board is supposed to judge it on the level 1, level 2, which is giving it 2 extra floors. but the board is going to have a review of a building that's 9 stories or 9 stories or higher, let's pretend. So that first review by Board of Architects could be that they say this building looks fantastic and it passes the muster and it's a beautiful wedding cake and it contextually fits, in their view, a location. But it still has to go through your board, the commission. I wonder if that approval can be given on something that is completely above and beyond the level 1, level 2. And this is sort of a question, I guess, for us to think through. Because I think some of the stuff that happens is that we're asking the board to take a harder view of context and compatibility. I think that's really the main focus that we're all trying to get to. Obviously, better aesthetics. But I think the gripes, if I should call it gripes, or the concerns that I've always heard deal more with context and with size and things like that. So I think what folks are trying to do is create more of a way to control that. And that, I think, is being sort of slid towards the Board of Architects. I may be wrong here, but that first review is critical. Now, the first review is meant to be, does it meet the criteria of this Mediterranean style? We're going to look at it very harshly through these new requirements and academics. A lot of these are academic requirements. But beyond that, there's a review there that they may say the building looks fantastic. It's still 5 stories higher than the code allows. I don't know what that means and how that process will happen, but I can see that their role may be, look, it looks fantastic and architecturally it's beautiful. That's one question. The second thing is, I think one of the important features of what this is trying to do, and I read it several times, is to incentivize several things, right? This is more about incentivizing. I would think that's what this is about. Because that's really what you need to do here, is to give people more reasons to do certain things. But it's, besides getting to the fact that we want to incentivize the Mediterranean, the second and third purpose and applicability lines, B and C, are promoting something different. They're promoting an assortment of street-level public realms and pedestrian amenities in exchange for increases in building height, residential density, and floor area. So that bonus is also tied to public realm. So that, in a sense, deviates a little bit from the Mediterranean. It's just asking for certain things. It could be any style. It's not necessarily a Mediterranean request. Is a design request, right? That's also in here. So the other item, again, provide additional bonuses to incentivize Coral Gables Mediterranean architecture design to continue support with the best practice of thematic, established historic fabric as referenced in best practice. So that's specifically, hey, we're going to try to get this to be Mediterranean from that point forward. But I think that the issue of us struggling with big buildings gets us back to the first 3 floors. And this is where we're fighting the architecture, but we're also fighting mass. So the requirements of the ground floor, the second floor, the third floor, to me, whether they're Mediterranean or any other style, is really the key for us to be able to judge our streets level. And that's one of the things that I want to discuss amongst us, because, again, we're pushing Mediterranean, but we really should be pushing maybe other things as well to the large degree. The third thing to bring up is the list of buildings that are being shown here, which are all perfectly good and so forth. Majority of them, I think, are lower scale buildings. The majority of them are lower scale buildings, 3, 4, 5-story buildings, which is good. They're great. There's only 4 or 5, maybe 3, 4 or 5 that are tall. Mostly the Breakers, the Biltmore, a couple others. There's only a few that come off Europe. Basically, we're trying to bring it back to what's being built by these architects or locally. There isn't a lot to go with. So I think the struggle goes back to tall buildings are hard. Doing them with Mediterranean style are really hard. And then there's not a lot to go with. You got a few hotels that have gone and made it to be 14, 15 stories. But I think that's part of our struggle, is whether this will work with the big buildings. And how do we do it? How do we make it? So I'm here to make this work. I'm here to help get it to the right place. I think we're all trying to get this to be right. And this question is debating this to the point where we feel we've done a good job in getting it to where we all want. Great architecture, compatibility, massing. And that's just my thoughts. And come back maybe later on when you guys have discussed some more.
Thank you, Vinny. Do we have any other speakers that are in the chamber signed up?
No.
What about in Zoom?
No one's indicated they want to speak. I sent a message to them if they wish to speak, to please raise their hand, and no one has.
And on the phone platform either?
No.
Okay, so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close it for public comment. Chip, would you mind going first?
No, I don't mind. I'm certainly not as educated as some of our board members here as to the skills that they have, but I guess what it boils down, and Vinny kind of hit on a second, there's the criteria that we established for the different bonuses. Did we assign values to them based on, are they the common area benefits? Does it make the building look better? You know, those different points, there's different bonus, I think there's 12 or 13 of them, was there?
Yeah, so if I got my PowerPoint slide, I can show you. Yeah, so there's basically those three different tables.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if we could look at those a second. Each of the criteria. That's what I see from here, unfortunately. But which ones speak specifically to the first 3 floors?
So obviously precedence, you would look at precedence of how those example buildings treat the first 3 floors. Let's see, the ground floor design, obviously is limited to just the ground floor, not the first 3, but a lot of the characteristics are the same. Let's see.
Wait, okay, let me back up, I'm sorry. So if we're really looking to improve the pedestrian feel and walkability or whatever we call it, Coral Gables, I would think that the encouragement of those lower areas are the ones that are probably the ones that should receive the most attention and developers should get the most benefit. Is that practical thinking, or are they all weighted the same?
No, I think you both are very correct. I think you really need to focus, again, on the base of the building because that's really where you're going to be seen. The base can range between...
Yeah.
The base can range depending on how tall the building is, how you want to divide it up. That's part of the composition of the building. So the base of the building, you want to have more fine details, a little more pedestrian scale versus the upper floors. Okay.
I get that. Are they valued more than other parts of the bonuses?
No. So what this is it's have the same weight as set up right now. It's a checklist, right? I don't want to say checklist because that makes it not as important. But it's not like if you meet criteria 3, you get 0.05 FAR.
Right. I'm just wondering the weighting of each of the WEIGHT, ING of each of the bonuses are all 8% or whatever 7%, whatever it adds up to. I don't know. 13 divided by 100. What is that? Are they? So the one on the first floor that gives you a great arcade to walk under is given the same amount of bonus as window trim or something like that.
Sure, but I think the ground floor and your base and the composition, and I think there's some requirements not in level 1, but or I think it's in level 1 because level 1 is the one that you need 6 of 12. You're also required to have a certain percentage of it needs to be applicable. Sorry, not applicable to. It needs to be habitable space facing the street. And that's really, I think, what we're trying to get at. It's not just a very beautiful designed parking garage, but actual uses that are facing the street. 'Cause that's really what you're going to start to create a nice pedestrian feel. You have people who are outside their balconies or in their windows, and you feel like you have the security of people watching eyes on the street, right? So I think having that is probably a little bit stronger than having a really beautiful parking garage for those first few floors.
So are you asking if there's a weighted scale type system?
Yeah, I don't think there is, though.
It doesn't sound like there is.
Right, no. What I'm trying to say is that the ground floor is addressed in multiple requirements.
I get it. And there were some things that were previously bonuses that are now, you have to do it.
Right.
So why was the
University of Miami, why was the San Sebastian Apartments X'd out? What was the, I'm just curious to know. I mean,
They felt like it wasn't an exemplary building. It was a little.
What?
It's designed in a very common way. It's a little. It's not very ornate, I guess. It's very pedestrian. That's how you would say it. Okay, very pedestrian. I think what they're trying to say is that it's not a very ornate building. It's very simple, and they felt like it wasn't a good example for a building to be getting Mediterranean bonus for if they're using that as their example. I think that was kind of the concern.
It's not exemplary of the style.
Exemplary what?
It's not exemplary of the style. Or of the classic architecture you're using as sample.
Right.
and then the last question I had to do with just basically, what's the end game on all of this? I mean, what is where are we headed in 5 years with this? What's the vision in 5 years with these changes?
I think we want to see better quality buildings in our urban
Quality,
areas.
better looking buildings,
Yes.
better
Better
flow.
quality buildings, yeah. Not as much cheap-looking buildings that barely meet the requirement, but some that you say, that was really beautiful building. I'm glad they got that extra
So there really
2 stories.
wasn't a thought about building up the downtown or congestion or density?
As far as
this concept,
No, this is really just a strengthening the criteria.
So as long as the buildings are good looking, the feeling about how dense it is or how busy it is downtown, that really doesn't matter?
Not part of this review. This really is this is just really just giving a toolbox to the Board of Architects to do their job that they want to do better of. I don't want to put words in their mouth. I have Judy here.
But I understand. But it gives them the opportunity to add more mass and add more FAR and add more height.
Which they're already doing right now, just with
They can
not as
already do
good
now,
buildings.
which is a concern of a lot of people.
Right.
Let's face it. And so this really doesn't deal with any of the density or the massing or the heights or anything like that. It's just simply design and what it looks like.
No, so there's some language in here about massing and how you need to be in context and how the Board of Architects could use that language to really strengthen their review and be able to control the architecture, the form of the buildings, right? This isn't addressing 0.5 FAR. It's not addressing additional 2 stories. It's addressing how to get that and giving them teeth and a toolbox to be able to form it in a way that they feel is appropriate.
Thank you.
So it's giving a tool, is what you're saying? Okay.
That's the intent.
Okay. Felix?
So, unfortunately, when the Blue Ribbon Committee stopped, You hear? So, when the Blue Ribbon Committee was disemboweled quickly by one of the commissioners that's no longer on this representing the city, it just stopped at a screeching halt. And I see that many of the comments that had already been addressed by the committee have now found themselves somewhat into this particular new standard. I have an issue, a very large issue, with the way that the BOA does their job. And I know that Judy is sitting right there, and I think the world of her. The problem, I think, is that most people don't understand that there are 2 components to the design review standards that the Board of Architects must apply. It's written in black and white in our zoning code. Section 5-102 is design review standards. It has nothing to do with bonuses, but it has everything to do with, first, that is the part that must be reviewed by the Board of Architects first. Why? And if you would indulge me, Mr. Chairman and board members, for example, A3, whether adjacent existing historic features, natural features, and street-level pedestrian view corridors are appropriately integrated or otherwise protected. 4, whether the amount and arrangement of open green space, including urban open space, e.g. plazas, or unimproved areas, e.g. open lawns, are appropriate to the design, function, and location in relation to the function of the structures of adjacent and surrounding properties. 5, whether sufficient buffering, including hard and soft scape, is provided when non-compatible uses abut or adjoin one another. 6, whether the proposed lighting provided for safe movement of persons and vehicles provided security and minimized glare and reflection on adjacent properties. 7, whether access to the property and circulation is safe and convenient for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles, and is designed to interfere as little as possible with the traffic flow on the roads and to permit vehicles a prompt and safe egress to the site. I'll skip to 9. Whether the application provides improvements, public open space, pedestrian amenities, which benefit the public. Why is this important? Because then you go to B. B1 is aesthetics, but nobody talks about B2, architectural compatibility with neighboring properties and uses. I have heard over and over and over by the Board of Architects that there is a representative from the city attorney's office where they tell them you can't look at these things. It's in the code. If the city attorney thinks that the Board of Architects cannot look at these things, then I think that the city attorney should somehow drive the ability to change what is written in black and white under Section 5102 Design Review Standards for the Board of Architects. Because the first sentence says, the Board of Architects shall determine if an application satisfies the following design review standards. I think that's important. When you go to the second page, because there are only 2 pages to this, you go to the second page under H, building scale and mass. And then I, building facade step backs. So if the Board of Architects have their hands tied because it's not written in the code, I get it. But it's written in the code, and I'm sure that the chair can probably say, yeah, we've been told we can't look at this or we can't look at that. I think that before the Board of Architects can review and assess where the bonuses can be issued to the applicant, I think this should be, instead of a one-step process, it should be a two-step process. The first step is making sure that they get the massing and they get all of these components in right where everybody feels comfortable. And compatibility that was laughed at by some people in the city is not a laughable matter. It's a matter that has to be addressed. And you cannot offer bonuses if you can't get the first component right. So when we first discussed going in for a preliminary review, which now is being proposed as mandatory, so people don't waste time and they get it right, then if you simply do the first part right, it would even save a lot more effort for the second part, which would be the med bonuses.
But
that's the first thing I want to address.
just a question though, from what Jennifer put up there, it's not the Board of Architects that gives the bonuses like you're saying. Am I incorrect? The Board of Architects approve whether it's Mediterranean and whether they're entitled to level 1 or level 2 as far as But it's up to the commission.
No.
No.
So I'm incorrect?
It's a change, Mr. Chairman, it's a change of zoning,
Correct.
is the
Correct,
commission.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
and it
yes.
goes with a recommendation from this board most of the time.
Okay.
But the only ones that grant it is not the city commission. That's how powerful the Board of Architects should and is and has been in the past. But what I am saying is that the massing, the compatibility, the urban planning, that is all part of it. Granted, there are certain rights that the property owner has. There's no doubt about that. But he's got to make it work to make sure that you have all of these things, and that's just part one without any bonuses. Now, when you get to part two, which are the bonuses, then the Board of Architects, right now, they simply have a point system. And this point system, as Chip correctly said, it's not a weighted system. You know, nowadays, kids go to high school, they're taking honors, whatever, they get a weighted system for them because of the degree of difficulty. What Chip has said correctly is that if you look at the pedestrian component, how we blend into the rest of the fabric of the neighborhood, that should be weighted. And right now, there is no weight. So if you put in a 4-inch reveal on a window, it carries the same weight as if you put a fountain on the ground floor where people can enjoy that. That's absurd. And that's because the simplification of this system has gotten to the point of where we are today. Then the only thing you can depend on is the ability of the architect and the agreeing of the developer to do what should be done to provide then great architecture. So I think that this is a very good step of having the mandatory meeting with the BOA first, but I think I see it over and over that they are handcuffed, and I don't think I am guessing at this. You could ask the chair of the Board of Architects whether that's a correct statement or not. The second thing I'd like to bring up, which I think is extremely important, is that there's 78 pages in Appendix A of site-specific parcels throughout the city. They are identified there. Most of these parcels either went through public hearings or they went through different mechanisms where there were certain guarantees that were offered through the public hearing process to the neighbors, to the surrounding area. It is absolutely incredible that in our code today, there is a small paragraph that says that, bless you.
The water?
Julio, should I go get my mask? Should I go get my mask? So,
I'm next to him.
hold your breath, Robert. So, one of the things I think is very important is that most individuals in the city don't understand that very innocuously there was a sentence that was added that said that basically these site-specific regulations trump everything, with one exception, that if you qualify for a Mediterranean bonus, that trumps the site-specific. I say that that should be stricken immediately. You can remove site-specifics, but then that would require that you go to the city commission to do it. Why are the site-specifics important? Sometimes, based on the site, you have a limitation of height, a limitation of use, a limitation of different things but it was done to be able to protect and guarantee something, and again, with the compatibility of the neighborhood. I think it has, that sentence should be stricken. It's in at least 3 different places in the zoning code. It has never been mentioned by staff to be removed, and I want to make sure that this is on this board's radar. The third thing, the compensation of the bonuses. The bonuses go through compensation through the use of height or square footage, through the increase of the floor area ratio. There are certain corridors in the city that are made specifically for height. The city of Coral Gables was designed in a north-south axis. It was not designed as an east-west axis. The principal axis was Ponce de Leon Boulevard. And now it's starting to be developed, especially on the north side. I don't have an issue with height when your right-of-way is of a significant amount. The problem that we have is that when there are changes of zoning, and then you throw in the compensation of the level 1 and level 2 bonuses, and you put it on a very small right-of-way, you create a losing proposition, because it becomes less human to scale, and it becomes less livable for the people that are in that area. I believe that there should be height, but I think that we should provide that bonus on the larger right-of-ways. We have larger right-of-ways such as Alhambra, where Alan Morris did his iconic building years ago, and many other buildings that are very large are on Alhambra. There are other right-of-ways that are also wide. You have to be careful when you're abutting single-family residential, so you do not dwarf or basically destroy those areas. So I think that where we put the height is important, and I also think that you should not be able to piggyback other things for additional height, such as parks. So it's amazing, we take away the setbacks when it comes to zoning, then there's no green space, and then we tell the developer, if you give us a 50-foot by 100-foot park, then we'll give you more height. We should put all the cards on the table and say, this is the way we should change it, and this is the way it should be. There are many other things, and I spent a tremendous amount of time to be fair to staff and the Board of Architects, and also to this board, because I had said that I thought that these bonuses had run their course. I will tell you right now that 3 years ago in 2021, we started looking with the Blue Ribbon Committee, we started looking at a lot of issues. And one of the issues were, it was almost an epiphany that, gee, you should get med bonuses if you do med architecture. I got that. Everybody got that. But we never went to the next level. I think it's important that people understand that since then, there have been other buildings that are being built that have nothing to do with med bonuses, but they were granted med bonuses. And whether it's sleight of hand or someone falling asleep at the wheel, it doesn't matter what the words say if the intent isn't really there. And it has to be brought to light, I think, to the Board of Architects, to the Planning Board, and to the Commission to make sure that it's successful. And I just think that we have a very serious issue when it comes to our planning, and we're not meshing the planning component with the architectural component, with the I'm not going to call it style, I'm going to call it good architecture component. I'm for great architecture, and I think that we have to be able to make sure that we give all the tools to the professionals and we safeguard the residents through the Board of Architects. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, if I may, 1 second. Craig, what was stated by Felix, that the city attorney stands by the Board of Architects and says you can't say this or say that. Can you comment on that? Or do you know?
I texted the city attorney, and she advised me that it's not accurate that the city attorney's office position is that where it says the Board of Architects shall determine if an application satisfies the following design review standards, section 5-102, it is not their position that the Board of Architects cannot consider this criteria, which the code requires them to consider that criteria. But I haven't had an at-length conversation. I'm just hearing this for the first time. And I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just saying that when I tried to summarize as quickly as I could what your position is, and apparently there's a miscommunication or misunderstanding.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the Chair of the Board of Architects to address specifically what was responded to by the city attorney, because I guarantee you, there's one thing I never do, which is lie.
Okay, well.
The reason, wait.
I don't think that's what he's saying.
No, I understand. And there's a simple reason that I don't lie. That way I don't have to remember what I said. So I would like, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, for the chair of the Board of Architects to simply say whether they have ever been informed by the city attorney's office through one of the assistant city attorneys, whether they can or cannot look at certain elements that are specifically in 5-102.
Well, if that's what you'd like to do, I mean, you're welcome to call up the individual. I just would rather not get into that type of a scenario at this meeting. But if it's something that you feel strongly about, then of course. But by the same token, I think that's something that I think has been brought up, and because of the fact that it's been brought up and on the record, we've asked the city attorney to look into it. I think it's something that will be looked at.
I mean, I certainly would be happy to get back to this board at the next meeting if there's any
I would
further.
like, the reason I would
I've
like
asked,
to.
actually, what I indicated to the city attorney is that I thought it was important to read the transcript of this discussion so that she had an opportunity to review what you've said. I'm only right now, limited to a minimum, a certain number of words to explain the situation. I in no way am suggesting that you're not lying. I think there may be a misunderstanding. That's
Well, would you feel, Felix, would you feel comfortable if the city attorney, if it's something that we ask?
I would actually feel more comfortable if the person that is in the trenches that chairs the board states whatever she wants to state.
And I second that.
Then if you,
So what I would say is...
Could you state your name?
Oh, sorry, Judy Carty, 920 Medina Avenue, Coral Gables. So what I would say to that is that there has been quite a long history on what we've been told we have purview over and what we've been told we don't have purview over. Actually, Gus was in our last meeting and did clarify again what we can and cannot review. And it is a nuanced response that he gave us, right? One thing I would like to do is, can you bring that slide up? Because there are things that we do not have purview over, right? We only have 2 stories that we can say that it can be increased by. The rest, we don't have purview. It has to go to commission.
Right.
So that is an accurate statement, right? That we are not allowed to say if something is acceptable at that height because it's not our purview.
Okay.
So I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is that I would probably agree with you that we have been told because of that, that the granting of additional height and additional FAR is really not our purview. We're looking at the architecture, and that is what we are there to do.
That's what you're tasked to do.
Yes.
Okay.
So, these things come in different waves, right? I think now the push is more that we would look at the context. And certainly, what I would respond to you, sir, is that there is a series of precedents, right? And all of those precedents have to be met. So they're not weighted in any way because they're all important. And the first one of those is actually, which is why I would strongly support these changes, is because the first one says that we now have to review context. And that is very specifically written, and it wasn't specifically written previously, even though I understand what you're saying, it is in the zoning code. So, and I don't know if do you have the document? Sorry. The first one, if you look, I don't know if you all have copies of this here, but the first prerequisite is context analysis, and it's proposed building massing, scale, and height shall be compatible with the urban context and adjacent buildings. And one thing I'd like to add to that, which is a discussion that we had last week, is that in the conceptual review, there is no requirement to bring in any context and scale and mass. And I really think that, to what you were saying, that as a first blush, does this fit, is really important. So, and it's emphasized in this new revision, right? And which is why I think this document helps us in terms of the Board of Architects
Which is to
tremendously.
what they're expanding on now.
Exactly.
But I have a question, since you bring exactly that. One of the requirements is that you have to consider the contextual context analysis. But if the property is zoned, let's say MF2, but the surrounding buildings are 1 or 2 stories, and the MF2 you're allowed to do much taller, because by
Right.
how do you do contextually there? Then you're gonna say, well, the existing buildings are 1 and 2 story, but even though your property is zone MF2, right, or something.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. It's the
So
biggest
how do you-
dilemma that we have, right? And we see single-family house and then,
Well, not
10-story
single-family
building.
house,
No,
but-
but that has come in, and that exists, right? Currently in the city, right, where we have a single-family house looking at a loading dock of a, 10-story building. And I have to say, I've had this discussion with multiple of you that I don't know that the Board of Architects and my colleagues, because there's a lot of money at play in the approval or lack of approval of these things, right, to a developer. I don't know how comfortable we are saying yay or nay. I feel it needs to be, honestly, you all at the planning and zoning level. And for years, we've said, hey, why isn't somebody else saying, yes, this is good to come to us, and then we'll review the architecture.
Mr.
Right?
Chairman, to answer,
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to respond to what Robert was saying, which is a very good point. One of the things that you do, if you go through this review, this 2-part review, is that many times, not always, but many times, the applicant is going to be applying for an upzoning. They never apply for a downzoning. They're applying for an upzoning. So maybe this is a way, from a massing standpoint, intensity standpoint, a use standpoint, to be able to say, wait a minute, over on this side, this isn't good, but if you put it on that side, it can work. And if you have the Board of Architects also giving you that type of information in the physical world that would help to understand it.
Felix, you're right if somebody's coming for an upzoning. But if they're not, your job to look at the contextual of that proposed building may not be easy to do because you're allowed to do something, but contextually, what you have next to it is not compatible. So what do you do then?
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but what Judy specifically said is, for example, the loading dock. That particular function of that particular project, you know where to put the zoning dock, but some people just, well, I could get 2 more units if I stick the loading dock directly in front of that single-family house.
But isn't that up to the Board of Architects to look at that?
But that has been the problem, Mr. Chairman. The problem has been what I said before, what Judy said now, which is that now they have the ability, and what they're proposing to do with certain parts of this change has been to provide even more clarity to be able to make those suggestions at that design review. You're correct. Should they, isn't that what they do?
But I would
Not
think
always.
But I would think that that's part of the task that the Board of Architects have, is to look at the quality of the design of a project. And when they look at the quality of the design of the project, the first thing I would do is look at where the loading dock is next to a single-family residential, then that means I have to assume that you've looked at it, or the Board of Architects has looked at it and has approved it.
You would be surprised how many times those projects come already, as we say before, so cooked that they can't do anything at that point.
But that project goes now before the entire Board of Architects, not just by a pocket of 3.
Oh, no. The big projects are entire board.
Right, so the entire, I mean, there's, how many set of eyes are looking at it at that point?
Now we're catching it. I mean, I think there was a period of time where it came, more. But it's not just, I mean, Robert knows this. It's a lot of items, right, that are back of house. It's FPL vault, it's loading dock, it's, it's the electric room, it's it's not always easy, and it does
A
depend
lot
on
of
the
functions
site.
that need to be looked at.
Services.
And they're big, blank, ugly walls, or worse again,
FPNO is one of them. You may say, I want to put the vault in the back, and FPNO is going to tell you, it's have to be right on the street. And you can't do anything about it, because they're not going to give you that service.
But let me talk about what Vinnie Torrey was talking about, and you were also talking about it. It's like before you comes a plan that is either Mediterranean or not, and it's 190 feet when it comes to you, okay? And you know darn well it has to come to the planning and zoning to get that and eventually commissioned to get approved. So you're approving a Mediterranean design that may not be 190 feet when you come down to it, and it never goes back to the Board of Architects. So you may be looking at a wedding cake. And it's going to be, at the end, a flat sheet cake with a cherry on the top. That's different architecture than what you approved.
absolutely. And that is a separate problem.
Okay, but it's a problem. It never goes back to you.
Exactly.
With any kind of significant change.
No, absolutely. And we see a lot of changes even that the commission makes that never come back to us.
But
So I would take some of the blame off.
Please,
I'm
Judy,
joking.
please, I'm not blaming the Board
But
of
I
Architects.
agree with you. Some of those things happen outside of our purview, and it does not come back.
Well, it seems like the process is flawed.
Right. That's a solvable process, in my opinion, because it could easily be brought back. Some of these items are more complicated because Robert is absolutely right. If the zoning allows, a particular zoning next to a 2-story, that's something that is already ratified by the city.
Right, exactly. But you're talking about loading docks. I've been to many DRC meetings. Isn't that the staff to say, hey, look, wait a minute, it's facing a residential? At that point, at the DRC meeting, isn't that up to the staff to say, architect, you can't do that before it even goes to any boards?
I think the bigger problem that we are facing is not the loading dock. It's contextually how are you going to be able to to integrate one and the other. And I think that's, how do you solve that? And there's many more that we're gonna go through here that are gonna make it more difficult for the Board of Architects to be able to do it correctly. You know, and let's go back to the example of the original Alan Morris building, because at least 3 of us, Chip, Avi and I, were here when that project first came to
When it
the
first started.
planning. Okay, that I will never forget, because it was during the pandemic, and their attorney who represented them went on to like almost 9 o'clock at night, and then he wanted 10 minutes for us to evaluate and approve the project, which, you know, I was the one, and Mr. Morris got mad at me because I made a motion immediately to defer, because, you know, it was not right. That project, we denied it. It went back multiple times to the Board of Architects, right?
It did.
And then onto this last time that it came back, finally bringing it down from 190 feet to, I forget the final, you know, height that it did. But it, 146, which originally we told them, and I think Vinny was on the board with us at the time. Yes. Okay, so that project went back, but, you know, I think there's a mechanism for the Board of Architects to go back and review and make sure that the project is acceptable, compatible, whatever you want to call it. I think the mechanism is there. I think the biggest problem that they're going to be looking at is, how do you make a determination what's appropriate, what's not appropriate for the project? If the project is going through a rezoning and they cannot, how are you going to,
Well,
how are you going to do that?
but in the case of the Alan Morris project, they were upzoning. And
But
if
they
would've-
were not approved. In the case of the Allen, I remember clearly, the case of the Allen Morris project was the massing was so big.
Right.
And
But-
the board, the commission, everybody said no. And
Everybody
that's
saw
why
it.
they came back with the design that they did and the size of the building. I mean, on there it was Vinny, Chip was on there, I was on there. Julio, I don't think you were you? And Robert.
I wasn't on there, but I came
recall you
publicly
came
and
to
I
speak.
spoke against it.
Yes, I
And the reason is that if they would have gone maybe to the Board of Architects, if they would have used this 2-tier system, and the Board of Architects would have told them at that time, your massing is just too out of proportion, they could have saved themselves maybe a lot of time and money.
But it was the commissioners who told them, we're not going to approve this, when I think they came twice, and that, it came before us. but
3
then
times to us.
It came, but then it's up to the commission. We can say no, but it's up to the commission to go ahead and say yes or no. I don't necessarily agree with you that it's up to the Board of Architects to state that the massing is just too big for the size. That's just, I think it's more for the Board of, I think it's more for the Board of Architects to look at a project if it fits within the design and the scope and possibly the scale. But if it passes the design from the Board of Architects, I understand what you, Felix, I know what
It says
you
it
read.
clearly.
I know, but that should be treated at the beginning then, when it goes to the Board of Architects. And it shouldn't go to the commission, and then the commission says, you know, we're not approving it for the 3rd time. I think what happened is the commission said for the 3rd time, we're not approving it. They went back to the drawing board. And when they went back to the drawing board, it had to go back through the entire process.
And again, I think that having the Board of Architects early on in there, speaking about the massing, which is specific in the code, I think is the best idea to be able to have that sounding board, because the training of the architect is helpful. The developer is doing numbers. The developer is crunching the numbers to see if he could get or she can get X to make it work. And the architect does their best in trying to make it fly. But at the same time, the land use attorney,
Can we put up a slide, would you mind? Jennifer has a perfect slide.
Yeah, could I have the PowerPoint slide, please?
Can
LCV?
you check the microphone over there, because I don't think you're talking
Which, this
into
one?
it. It's not picking you up.
Mine or Jennifer's?
Okay.
It's
very
picking
good.
up.
Okay. But to me, this is the key slide, right? That middle piece, that's not us. That's what the city attorney is saying. You don't have purview over that, right? And that's true. I mean, there's more that's being said as well, but lately that's the,
But you're there to, correct me, I'm going back to what I had said before. You're there to determine whether it qualifies for the level 1 or for the level 2 within the design. But you're not there when it goes to the change of land use and zoning, which is
But the
what
project
gives.
but we
Like
get
to
that.
them.
We get the big one, right?
Right, but then, but you can't, can you deny a project because it's too big right now?
Well, that's the thing.
but-
That's
Well,
the
you know,
essence of this discussion.
it's
No, we cannot.
so
It's not up to
let me
us.
ask you this, because it seems like the cart is before the horse. It sounds like the developer
Exactly.
should have the ability to know how this planning board feels on the asks for the additional heights, and if it's appropriate for the land use. We should be the ones looking at that before it goes to the Board of
Totally,
Architects.
before they cook the project.
Right, before they cook the project, and then you give it the blessing one way or another, and it comes back to us for
Well, it can
what
be
we're
on a
currently
very
doing.
preliminary basis, right? They don't
Yeah.
have to decide on the architecture.
Right,
even.
exactly. But if they say we want 190 feet,
Exactly.
and we know what the land use
But
is,
at
we
the
have
end of
that
the day,
purview.
Sue, we're recommending board. The commission is the one that's going to make the final decision.
Well, that's up to them, but I mean, I'm just talking about the process right now. What they do is out of our control, but what is in our control is the ability to say to the developer, that's going to work. The massing is going to work or it's not going to work. And the architecture is secondary to that.
It's not even the massing to me that you all need to say works. It's like, can this location within the city,
Right.
with its infrastructure, with its, roads, et cetera, can it support a building of this size?
And the compatibility. We keep,
And
Felix has been
compatibility.
preaching compatibility
Absolutely.
forever. It's in the code.
But I want to remind everybody, we're here to look at the Mediterranean bonuses
Yes,
as opposed.
you're right. We
and
digress.
That's what's before us. I'm not disagreeing with you, Sue.
Okay, but I mean, this is a great discussion because I think it's backwards. I think we've been doing things
It's
backwards.
a very good discussion. I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I want to do is I want to try to move it forward based upon what's before us, which is the Mediterranean. Now, Vinny, you had made some comments. Would you mind coming second? I'd like to ask you on that, please.
I wanted to come back to where Felix was going. I want to remind you something. I think this goes amiss by everybody. The way first of all, we're all trying to get to the same place. Process is the key here, and no other city has this process as intricate and as good as we have it. So this is a good thing. We're just trying to perfect it. We're going to get better buildings. The code, the way it's written, has a site plan approval by the commission. It's basically the commission has to have review of anything over 20,000 feet. What happens? It's meant to be horse traded. Everything is a horse trade. Everything is in negotiations, and that's the way it's written. Whoever doesn't like it, it's the way it is. So when you get parks on the corner and you get setbacks that are changed, is because somebody's saying, if you give me this, you can do this, and those decisions somewhat are discussed and sometimes negotiated early on. They are. And when it comes to the Board of Architects, hopefully they say, well, if you can get it through and make it look good, that's even better, right? Get the neighbors to it. Some of these things, they're in concept approved, then they have to get through the board, they have to look right, and they have to get through the neighbors. So it's a process that begins with the negotiations, it ends with commission approval. And it's difficult because sometimes what they're trying to do isn't anywhere near what the code requires. They're going to move the thing right over. They're going to say, but I'm going to give you a park over there. And all of a sudden, it changes dramatically. So what they're trying to do, I think, with what's given to them, is what's the best possible building we can make here, contextually and architecturally. But sometimes what they're being given, these negotiations either have begun or are going to happen at the end. And they're in the middle of these negotiations. It's the way it is. So the task for them...
You're talking about a pad.
No, I'm talking about a lot of the projects.
No, but I mean, you're talking specifically about a pad where you could avoid.
No, I give you an example.
Okay.
You have plenty of examples, but the building that's going on right now in the Merrick Park Village, I think it's a condo, it used to be a hotel, it's a condo, it has a park on one side. They slid the building over. I think they added a floor. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But basically, that was one example where the building was changed, maybe for the better. I'm not suggesting it's not. Every project, or not every project, a lot of projects are done that way. Can I have an extra floor? Can I have this? It's just normal. That's the way the code is written. But I think that ultimate goal, with that being said, I'm not sure we can change that, is how do we get the better architecture? And I'm not sure, again, this is a process that I don't know the final answer to, but I know that maybe you should go first, or maybe the board should go first. I can't see you going first because you can't see what's being proposed. It has to be conceived, it has to be, this is going to be beautiful at the end, and you guys say, you want 2 extra floors, but it looks horrible, or it doesn't work, or those extra 2 floors aren't so bad. It's got to start with the board, I think.
No, you're right. You cannot grant a zoning change without seeing something. I mean, that to me is not the way to do it. We're just saying that you have to come here first, or what I understood. You can't do that.
I didn't say that.
No.
It's
said it,
difficult, but
I mean, can't you have a conceptual drawing with height?
that's what they're forcing them to do now.
No, I understand that, but you're also baking in the Mediterranean features.
Yeah, and again, they're going to get more square footage, and they're going to get an extra 2 floors, so they may have to make that work better. They have to make it work. Now they're saying, this new written, you got to make it work. That extra 2 floors that we're giving you have to be earned. And I think that's where the problem was, that the lacks of the strictness of the way they were interpreting it were allowing things that I think we all heard. They don't deserve the 2 extra floors. That's not Mediterranean, that kind of thing. So, but I think that the first review, whether they're going to get more floors, less floors, big mass, less mass, is basically, hey, architecturally this works, contextually this works. Now, it may be that, yeah, it's in the middle of an area that it's completely, first time around. Good example, and we all maybe have heard this, Alan Morris is, let me see here, is north of a property that is even more intensity that hasn't been built yet. Right? We know which one that is, right? It's the courthouse. So if you had been that building first, Alan Morris would have gotten an easier slide through their process. But since it's not, they had to go through a harder process. But if you had a building built there, again, it's a different. I still think that board of architects should go first, regardless of this thing, and say this building works, this building doesn't work, and obviously increase the way we.
I agree with you. I think the board, the process, whether it's 100% or not, they have to go first. Because they're not going to come to us, they're not going to go to commission and says, I want to do a zoning change, and then let me start over with the board of architects.
Okay, what happens when you get the flat cake, because we reject it, with the flat cake with the cherry on the top? Is that the architecture that they approved?
It's the commission. You have elected officials that come in that do a vote.
No, I know they have the final say, but at that point, why have a board of architect?
I think it has to go back.
Huh?
I think they agreed that it has to go back.
Well, yeah, but I mean, is that the process right now, or is it maybe kind of sort of sometime?
Jennifer, would you answer that?
We can only have one person speak at a time, and they have to be at the podium.
Vinny, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
So yes, the site plan requires board of architect approval. Now, if they've given an approval before, it goes up to this planning and zoning board, it goes to commission, the commission changes something. At that point, it does go back to the city architect. He determines if it's substantial enough to take it back to the whole board, or if he's okay with it moving forward with the commission.
Who determines that?
City architect.
City architect.
The city architect.
Right.
One person.
Yes, and there have been times that the city commission sent something back to the board of architects. The board of architects, I think, deferred with a lot of comments, and the commission basically vetoed it and brought it back to the commission about a passageway on a certain property.
We went through that not that long ago, well, maybe a couple of years now, where the development director tried to defend one of the projects on US 1. And they changed the doors to sliding doors. They did this, they did that, all through shop drawings. Nobody reviewed it.
The permitting process.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was like mea culpa, and that was it. And now I understand the same thing happening with some large projects where the railings are going from what looked like wrought iron railings that were very nice to now glass railings. Again, not even going to the city architect because it's being treated as a shop drawing. They don't even know what they have under their own noses, and it changes the look of, you know, some of the architecture.
But that's up to, how do I say this? You've got to have the right staff in place, because one person or one board is not going to be able to look at everything. And that's why you have a city architect, or there's a process. And I understand what you're talking about, the glass balconies. It doesn't make sense to me. You know, I didn't know about it, but what you're saying now, it doesn't make sense when you're looking
Well,
at
we're looking at it every day, the Paseo de la Riviera. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
They got the bonus. They fought for it. We fought against it. The neighbors fought against it. They got the bonus. It got built. There's sliding glass windows throughout the whole building. No one wants to take responsibility how that happened, but it happened. And that's why I'm saying when one person says, and it's the city architect or just one person alone, and they say, yeah, go ahead with it, do this. That's how sliding glass gets in a building that should not have been Mediterranean because it didn't meet the code. And we're stuck with it now. What are we going to do? Are we fining the developer for going against?
But I think we should move forward. I think the Mediterranean bonus is being brought before us to take a look. It's being brought before the commission. And that's what we're tasked with. And I think going back and looking, this should have been done or this should not have been done, isn't going to get us really anywhere right now.
Well, you have to look at the past so you don't make the same mistake.
Well, it's good to bring it up, but let's try to move forward with what we have here. If it's something that there's a recommendation down the road that should be put in there, or one of the board members feels it should go in, we can look.
But it goes back to the original, the contextual analysis, and to be able to move with this. That was, you know, my first comment is, how do we resolve that? Because, you know, if it's not within the character, the rest doesn't mean anything, you know, to me. And how do you give, you know, the Board of Architects the necessary tools to be able to do that? And when it's my turn, I will express my concerns because I have a few of them,
Okay.
you know, and
What I'd like to do is, Julio, would you mind continuing on? That way we get a little bit from her. Sue, were you done? I apologize.
I didn't start. I was just commenting on a
No, but
previous.
are you done with your comments right now so I can
No,
continue?
I'm not. I didn't start.
No, just with the comments you have for now. I'll call you to,
The comments on this proposal, right?
the comments that you had made as to how to go ahead and define it. In other words, I'd like to get your full comments.
Right now?
No, I'd like to get Julio's first, and
I
then
thought we were going this way.
I like to skip.
Okay, because I wanted to piggyback off of him, but I'll wait.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't want you to wait.
Because I do want to talk about abuses, and this is a perfect opportunity to talk about abuses. We have had an abuse of our Mediterranean code. I think we can all agree. People up here say, oh yeah, how did that happen? You know, we've had abuses, because I think the process is flawed. So I think we have to seriously look at that process, okay, so it doesn't happen again. And that falls into what are we trying to approve today? We're trying to approve stricter language, more criteria, stricter criteria, more pictures. You know what it all comes down to? It all comes down to subjective interpretation. Subjective interpretation. That's what it comes down to, because we've seen it with the current code. It's subjective. So anytime you have a subjective code, there are going to be abuses. We saw it with Zuby. We saw it with Paseo de la Riviera. There are probably many more that I don't even know about. So we're talking about no matter what kind of language you write and how many criteria you come up with, there will always be abuses. And particularly now that I'm hearing about all the holes in our process about how things get slipped by and what should be and what shouldn't be, I think we should be addressing the process rather than voting on a code that's going to be abused again. The compatibility issue that Felix brings up, I think, is very important. I think we need to have the city attorney fully explain what the Board of Architects are able to do and what they should do by the code. because I think it's about compatibility, okay? I can tell you that in my neighborhood, I live in a nondescript architectural neighborhood in Coral Gables. If somebody came in with an architect with a Mediterranean design for my neighborhood, no matter how beautiful it is, it doesn't fit. It's a nondescript neighborhood, nondescript architectural neighborhood. So the compatibility, I think, is the number one issue that we're looking at here, and that should be in the purview of the Board of Architects. And I think until we solve that, I don't think any of this is going to matter. Nothing is going to matter. There's going to be too many abuses. So you can tell where I'm going with my vote. We need a lot of fixing before we come up with more stuff.
Thank you. Julio?
Cities don't grow overnight. They're a slow process. I think what we're seeing right now is that slow process. You give and you take and you measure and you cut, but takes a while for everybody to be in one concert. Board of Architects, I don't see any reason why, even though it's not the preview of the Board of Architects to make a decision on the height of a building, they can still make a comment on the quality of architecture, even though it's not a zoning change that they're looking at. So I think to tell them this is not your preview, you cannot make a decision or you cannot make a comment on that, I think they should have the flexibility, if they see something that is out of scale, to say it. And you can send it through with notes saying, okay, the architecture is good, but we don't like the height change or whatever. So I think they should have that flexibility, because they're the first eyes that the city has on any project that's coming through. So I think they should be given the flexibility, and nobody should be telling them, no, you cannot talk about that because that's not in your preview. So either we have to change the preview of the Board of Architects, or we have to allow them to have that. Because I feel a lot more comfortable when I sleep better at night knowing that the Board of Architects is there and that it's looking at the projects early on before it gets a full set of working drawings out on the street. So that's one. The other one is, it's going to take time. It's going to take time for us, we all have different ways of looking at projects. We all have different ways of looking at a city, but we're all looking at trying to improve the quality of the environment. And it could be a Mediterranean building, or it could be a contemporary building. A lot of the things that we talk about, the quality at street level, the first 3 floors, the top of the buildings, could work either with a Mediterranean architecture or contemporary architecture. And I think that's what's more important. I think that we came to depend on the board, on the Mediterranean architecture as the cure-all. And it always bothers me that there's no comments anywhere in the city about the quality of the architecture of those buildings which are not Mediterranean. But we have to be looking at it. We know that there's been a very bad examples of Mediterranean architecture that has passed through all of our hands, and that they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have gone through the Board of Architects, it shouldn't have gone through planning and zoning, and it shouldn't have gone through the City Commission. And just because you put 3 arches on the ground floor, an arcade, and a top of the floor, that does not make it a Mediterranean architecture. So I think the direction that this is going, we should try to quantify and qualify 2 things, projects, so that we preserve and improve the quality of the architecture and the environment of the city. It's the right way of doing it.
Thank you. Javier?
First of all, thank you, everybody, for your public comments. I think they were all very good. And we're also looking at the same problem from many different ways. And for the changes that are being proposed for the Med bonus, that's a very specific thing that we are going to be deciding today. But what I'm hearing is also that we have a problem with process, We are addressing it partially through the conceptual review, which will involve some massing. But the underlying problem is that we have a multiplier effect with regards to zoning changes and comprehensive land use changes. And unfortunately, the Board of Architects is presented with a proposed project which includes those without ever having been necessarily approved by the commission. So they're tasked with reviewing a design which is codependent on a change in zoning without ever really looking at what the massing and implication is. Now, the conceptual review, which is part of the changes that were being addressed here today, would go a long way towards that. And under Ms. Carty's stewardship of the Board of Architects, I can tell you that it's really well-run, very collegial. The commentary is all fairly non-abrasive between the presenters and the reviewers, and it's always very constructive. So such that we are already getting a better quality of architecture in this city. And this is one of the tools that were needed. But there's an overlying issue, which is that conflation of the design with the change in zoning, which is really what creates the massing and objections that we have of these buildings that happen that put everybody's hair on fire for obvious reasons, because they are non-contextual. If we were to take the Biltmore, which I think we all agree is a beautiful building, and we put it slap up to US 1, I guarantee you nobody's going to like it because it's not quite contextual, is it? But yet it would be perfectly acceptable from a Board of Architecture point of view with regards to its design. So the massing, its location, and its approval of the zoning change is really one issue that is parallel to, but outside of the purview of the Board of Architects. But it needs to be addressed, I think, as a separate issue. And that's a discussion for another time. Perhaps there is a separate review for zoning change as part of the conceptual review. Once that's approved, maybe that has to get approved, and then it goes back to the Board of Architects as, okay, here's your envelope. Now design a building. And then you review it. And that might solve the problem. Okay? And that's just one lay person's idea of a possible solution to help get us around the big problem, the biggest problem, the elephant in the room, where we get these projects that are like surprise, and we don't like those surprises because they usually do not end well. Now, with regards to context, I think that the conceptual review that we're offering, and now probably making mandatory for projects over 20,000 square feet, is very positive. It needs to be mandatory if you're going to go for zoning change. Absolutely. I think that that's one issue I think I would like to see included in the changes to the med bonus. That if you go over 20,000 and you're going for a med bonus, you better get a conceptual review prior to submittal for design review, and not being an optional.
They do already.
Is that the way it's written?
Yes.
Okay, because I wasn't sure the way I read it, it didn't look like it was, maybe I was reading an older version where it was still
Yes, as
optional.
proposed today, the conceptual review is mandatory for any med bonus,
Okay.
whether it's small scale or large scale.
But also, is it required for any zoning change?
It is not.
Let's say you're
today.
building by right, but you don't care about the med bonus, so you just want to go get a zoning change and increase your density. Are you
Right.
required?
You're not required,
'Cause
but
it's outside
again,
of
they
the
usually
med
travel
bonus.
together anyway,
It's
because it's the
outside of the
preference of the
med
board
bonus.
and the commission.
Okay. Again, a discussion for another day. There is something to be done with regards to its conceptual review and separating the zoning approval or the increases from going through the Board of Architects before it gets approved, before the implications of that are approved. So that's my particular point. I don't have an issue with the recommendations as presented today. So, but I just want to underline the fact that we are dealing with only a very limited part of what is the problem with regards to developmental review in the city. I offer an example in which a project, and I'll say which one it is, it was the Publix project, came to us for a review for a variance. So they went to the Board of Adjustments, and I just happened to be sitting as the chair at that board at that time. And my understanding is that all the fish had been cut, all the bait had been divided up amongst the fishermen, and everybody was happy. And that the project was done. It was frozen. That was it. And at that point, it seemed to be okay. It seems to meet all the requirements for the variance. It was positively recommended by staff, and we voted to approve it. And then by happenstance, I ended up being on this board where we got to review the project again, and everything was thrown up in the air. And that was part of not having had a conceptual review for a project over 20,000 square feet, where those decisions should have been made and should have been locked into an agreement to then be submitted to the Board of Architects for review. So you're not getting these redesigns halfway between one review board and another review board and then expecting it to be finally resolved by the commission. And if that's the case, then that's neither transparent nor should it be allowed. So we need to look at how the process works in general. This is just the specific of the med bonus. And as I said, I don't have a problem with the recommendations. In fact, I'm very positive supporting the changes as proposed. We can always add more, but we got to start somewhere. And I think this is a very good start. So that's it. That's my comments.
Thank you.
Robert? Before you do, Mr. Chairman, if you can hear from my cold, I am not feeling well. So if I may be excused, of course, before.
I vote on that, yes. You're next to me.
Too late, Robert.
I've been holding my breath.
Julio, thank you for coming. Let the record note that Julio is excused and is leaving the
Hope you
chambers.
feel better, Julio.
Feel better. Robert?
Thank you. I'm not going to go back to the process. I'm just going to concentrate on giving my comment based on what was presented to us today. And I think some of us, I know Felix and I know Javier, have mentioned in the past that it's becoming very prescriptive in the way that this is being put together. And what I would like to, Jennifer, if you could put up the example, the exhibit of the Alan Morris building, the latest, because, and I'm just going to use a couple of examples. When it says, may require classical massing. I see this building, by the way, I like this building a lot. Okay, I think the new building, not the old building. And I'm trying to look at how do I define classical massing in that structure. And I personally don't know how to define that. But again, I do like that building. And where this is coming very prescriptive, if I look at that elevation, that facade, I see that building is probably, I would say 70%, 75% glass to solid. Okay? Right? But when I look at what's been asked of windows and door, that the proportion of 1 to 5 and not of the ratio of windows and door to solid wall should be measured for each floor to have a 1 to 5 ratio, and at a minimum of 1 to 3. I'm not sure how to correlate this with that, which again I really think they did a great job. Okay, and how do you do that? That's one. The other, which I think Judy started to mention, is when you have to incorporate the FP&L vault and all the other back of house areas that unfortunately are needed. And under the provision or the prerequisites that a minimum of 80% of the linear frontage of each story of any building facing a primary street should be habitable space. Well, unfortunately, some of the properties in the city of Coral Gables, the depth is 100 feet. Okay? And the same paragraph says, all storage of vehicles or off-street parking that is above grade should not occur within 20 feet of the front setback line. So you have a 10-foot setback, and then you have to put 20 feet. That gives you 70 feet, assuming that you're not going to do zero setback on the back. So how do you make a podium work having to put a habitable space and having those depth? And unfortunately, the reality, And that, you know, the depth of the property in the Gables, the majority are 100 feet. So I have a problem with some of this number, and maybe it's 20 feet from the front setback, from the property line, but not from the setback, because otherwise it's impossible to make, you know, more than a one-story building. Am I looking at it, you know, am I not misreading this? I think a lot of the other sections are acceptable, even though I'm not a fan to say ornate windows, but, you know, it's okay. It's subjective to interpretation. But I think this, is it going in the right direction? I agree with some of the comments, Javier. We need to start somewhere. But I think this is becoming very prescriptive. And Felix, you and I were on that Blue Ribbon Committee. And I remember you mentioned on many occasions that the Region Bank building on Ponce de Leon was a great building. Okay, and I agree with you. And I think a lot of the architects will agree with that. With this, that building is impossible to do. Okay, that building, we will not be able to get with this. They won't be able to get that. Right? Am I?
No, listen, I wrote,
Felix, can you talk into the microphone, please?
I wrote, so you know where I'm coming from, right on this section. I had written, the formula. And then test the formula. Because one of the problems is that when you write these formulas, design with it. See if it works. See if you can do what you're saying. And that's the problem when you have prescriptive codes. Half of the time, it doesn't work right. And by the way, the symmetry, if the picture would have been taken straight on from university, looks completely different. The classical component is there, not from the angle that was shown to you there. But it is definitely on the other side. But the point is that when you get into the formulas, you start getting into trouble real quick. And I agree with you 100%.
And then this makes it more difficult for the BOA to follow, because at least that's my opinion. You know, I think that a lot of this has been very good, and I read it, and you know, I even went back and even looked at the best practice manual that we had in the city. That I don't know how much of this really is really
applicable.
Okay, you know, I think the new examples that you're putting in there are probably more appropriate, because you got taller building. I forget who, I don't know if it was Vinny or somebody says the problem that you have is when you have taller buildings, it's a big difference between the Think building and a building like this. So I like where we're going. I think there's a lot of things that needs to be worked out. I don't know what's going to happen today with this.
I mean, I agree that we're not there yet. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. It's very valuable, the comments that we got from the architects who are on the board, Judy herself, who came and told us what's there. One of the questions that I have is in your staff recommendation on, if you can pull up on, bear with me, let me get to where it is. It was on page 2. At the top, you start talking about the plaza. On page 2 of the recommendation, you say the architectural elements and proportions of the recently built plaza, formerly known as the Mediterranean Village, have received significant recognition.
Architecturally, yes.
Correct. Can you go into that? You're saying that what they've provided in the Mediterranean style has received a lot of recognition.
No, I think just the built environment, the built project, the plaza has received, praise as far as architectural quality that it has, right? Mostly on the buildings that are facing ponds, to be honest.
But at the same time...
But the reason it's bringing up is because they have their own pad that includes architectural standards, right? And none of those standards, the proportions between the bay, the widths of the windows and the width of the bay or the window bay, and other things have come from those standards that are in the Mediterranean, what's it called, Mediterranean Village pad standards.
But at the same time, that's one of the most contested projects. By sitting on the board, that's one of the projects that people have come and complained the most about.
Right, but from my understanding, it's not about the architecture, it's about the scale.
The massing.
The massing.
Right, but the point that I'm getting to is by being able to do that architecture, they were able to get that massing.
No, they
They
encroached
were
over,
not?
they encroached over a lot of streets.
The pad came with the pad came with an overall design of the
Correct.
project on a mass, and that's how it was originally approved. And they came back to this board 3 times, or 4 times.
Right, we voted
Where,
no.
where it got increase and increase and increase.
Correct.
But it had nothing to do with the architecture. It had to do with the FAR and the entitlement that was being granted to that property.
And the bonuses, it didn't
The
have
bonuses
anything to
came on
do?
top, but I don't think it had any bonuses. It was all part of a PAD anyway.
True, but you can't get that
No,
height.
they
unless
got
you have the-
bonuses.
No, they got bonuses for height.
Well, that's what I'm
bonuses
saying
for
is, they got the bonuses that came off of that style.
I know, but that's what I was saying, that's a multiplying effect. It's a conflating, multiplying effect that I think the city and its residents are naturally objecting to.
Agreed. No, I agree, but here it's being mentioned, it stuck to me reading this, that project is being mentioned as such a great project. I'm not saying it's an ugly project, I agree. I think what's captivating a lot is what's on the ground floor, and that's what Vinny spoke about, is that you're able to look at it on the ground level or the ground floor and see a lot of the Mediterranean style, as opposed to just putting everything on the top with a steeple, with a roof, or whatever is being done. But at the same time, I'm not sure that myself as one individual or one member would want to have all the buildings look the same.
No.
Or have, the way it's being described here is sort of like, here's a Biltmore, or here's these buildings. You want to design, you got to design as these buildings.
Right, which is the issue now, is now we have 8 buildings and that's it, and most of them are 2 stories.
But to me, there should be more of a diversity within the design, and I think some of the design, you have good architects and you have bad architects. And it's really up to the Board of Architects, and now as a whole, to look at the design and say, this is good, or this is really just a bad job. They're just trying to get FAR with a straightforward concrete facade. But as a resident, it just concerns me that the buildings will start to look the same that are being designed, the way I'm reading this, with the requirements. Because I think by nature, most of the developers are going to want to get as much FAR as they can. Whether they're going to get approved or not, I don't know. But because of dollars and cents and square footage, they want more FAR. And by wanting more FAR, they're going to say, okay, this is what you have to design. Architect X, they're a good architect, but I want to go with the person that designed specifically this only style in this type of building. And I don't know if I agree with that throughout the city or throughout these areas, that those buildings be that way. What bothers me the most is what I think the word that was used that Rob brought up, which is prescriptive. I think there has to be something more there. I think we're in the right direction. And I understand, to me, probably this all started because of FAR. And it was being granted to people that design or put a little steeple or just something at some point in the building and said, this is Mediterranean, give me my FAR. And I think the purpose is to curtail that. And I could be wrong, but that's what I'm hearing from everybody and the way they're talking. And at the same time, there's a good side and a bad side to that. Because you can start to curtail it, but then everything may just start to look with the same type of designs that are going on in there. And to me, I wouldn't want to see all that. It's a different point of view, I think, than most of you have spoken about. But to me, not being an architect, that would bother me. And I really thought hard about Vinny's point that he said, you know, the first 3 levels is really what you see in a pedestrian area or in these areas. And I think really need to concentrate on those levels, even though you got to do some kind of a frame or so forth to build on top of it. But that's really what the pedestrians, to me, that's what you see. When you're walking downtown or you're walking through a certain area, you're visualizing, you're looking at those areas, those windows. And if you have to go ahead and take every window and put some kind of a, I don't know what the right word is that they use at the bottom that makes it Mediterranean.
A sill.
If you go ahead and have to put a specific sill on that window so it qualifies, is that really the right thing for those buildings to have? I don't know. But to me, I just don't know if I would want that in all those buildings for it to qualify.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If a developer comes in and they've checked all 12 boxes, the Board of Architects could say, we're not going to grant you the bonus, right?
It's probably a little more difficult to back that no up with, but yes, I think they have the right to say no. Because a lot of that language, they kind of finesse to make sure that you're not just sticking elements onto the building.
So they can say no.
Designed to a
great,
comprehensive.
we love it all, but we're not going to give you your additional FAR, we're not going to give you your additional height. They could say that, correct?
They can.
So the Board of
They didn't give
Architects,
specific reasons of why.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can say
but
that.
that's why I ask our attorney then. I mean,
Robert is 100% right. There's only one part of your code that does allow the discretion of lowering the amount of the bonus. And that is when it's an addition or renovation. That's the only place that says, and in fact, I recommended where I marked up to have the ability to do that. So when you see it, listen, you did a good job. We're going to give you everything that you strive for. It gives you that incentive to do a better job, which I think that's what you were talking about. But the point is that it does it clearly in the code, and it says it clearly under where you have the renovations component of it. And I marked it up. And in there, it says specifically that they have the ability of only giving you part of it. Here it is, under your page 3, section E as in echo, additions, restoration, and renovations of existing buildings. The board shall have final determination to the amount of bonus granted. Right there, black and white.
So does that apply throughout the whole?
I would apply it to the whole thing.
Okay.
I would. Because that gives you a tool for the Board of Architects to say more.
Right.
If the code goes on, sorry, really quick, the code goes on for each of those tables, those level 1 and level 2, it goes on to say that additional bonus up to 0.3 and up to 0.2. So they're not required to say you get the whole 12, you have 0.3. They may feel that the intensity is too much and they only want to give a 0.15.
So I guess my point is the discussion about the Board of Architects not having control over height or massing.
They don't know that, Chip. That's the problem. They don't.
Ma'am, Judy, can you come up? Sorry.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that, Chip,
Could you just repeat? I apologize.
Sure.
It's really important that we get the full transcript, not only because the commission wants the benefit of this. So could you just mention what you just said before?
Sure, absolutely. And what I asked really is to Felix's earlier point of what we can and cannot speak on. It would be great if we could get a written interpretation by the city attorney so that it is very clear and we're not basing it on sort of varying.
So that was my thought is if you know when you get the building in front of you initially, you know the height, right? Mm-hmm. And you know how that building's going to look at 15 stories, or you know how that building's going to look at 13 stories.
Not
hypothetically, I mean, you would decide, hey.
We're all probably thinking something different.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I mean, you can look at a building and say, I can't look at a building and look at that picture and say that building will look good at 8 stories, or that building would look good at 12 stories, or that building would look good at 15 stories. I don't have that ability, but I'm sure that your trained eye, you probably could, or Robert's trained eye could say, that building would look better if it was a little taller, or a little shorter, or a little fatter, or a little skinnier. I mean, am I
Yes,
way off base on that?
That's accurate.
Okay, so if you have an architectural, if you have bonuses coming to you, and you like the style of the building, but you just don't think the bonuses would make that building look better at 15 stories, why not just deny the bonuses?
Remember, we are told that those are not part
No,
of
I know
our
you, that's what you're
purview.
being told. That's what I'm
Right?
saying the practicality of
Exactly.
the issue would be,
Right.
to me.
To Felix's point, that's what we have been instructed. We're looking at the architecture because the purview is not ours to tell them that.
Well, not only that, Chip, but she might say it would look better shorter, so no, but the rest of the Board of Architects might say, no, we love it. That's where the subjectivity comes in.
Well, there's
Everybody's
always
going to look
opinions.
at
I mean,
it
that's what we
differently.
embrace. There's 9 opinions on the board. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the diversity that we get.
right.
But remember, one thing I want to say, though, the Alan Morris building, it was not only the size of it, it was the architecture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to not be clear on that. That's why we at the board denied it multiple times.
Also, Robert is, again, 100% correct in saying because it doesn't tell you specifically. I heard, where'd she go? Oh, I heard you say that it's implied. It's implied saying up to. But this says it crystal clear when it says the board shall have final determination to the amount of the bonus granted. In my opinion, that should be added in the other part because therefore, maybe at that particular point, you could even start goofing around with certain elements on the pedestrian level, let's say for the plazas or the pedestrian experience, et cetera, and weigh it even more if you think that it deserves that additional bonus there. It gives you that flexibility. But right now, it's not written that way.
But Felix, what happens if the Board of Architects says, no, we're not going to grant you the additional floors? Right? And then they go to a commission, the commission says, or, I mean, I guess it's appealed to, of the, and then take it to commission and says, yes, we're going to grant you the additional floors.
Right.
So how do you?
I have a real serious problem with one project that's going up in the city that I'm not going to mention. And the problem that I have, it's a substantial project. They were granted Mediterranean bonuses. And I'm more Martian than it is Mediterranean. I have a problem with that. And it just happened recently. It was just approved recently. You're going to have issues. There's no doubt about it. But I think that the first thing is you have to give the Board of Architects the tools for them to develop or redevelop the reputation that they've had here in the past of guarding us. I think also that the plaza, which I have spoken over and over again as a critic, is that I think that they had many opportunities to do something and still come up with the square footages that they had, where it could have been done in a different way. It was driven, not with present staff excluded, it was driven a lot by staff. And part of the cooks that were in the kitchen were staff. And it really is unfortunate because that building, they put a lot of money into the detailing of that building. There's no doubt. And you can't bash them for that. And they did what they were allowed to do in this city. So they can't be blamed for that. But what I'm saying is, you have to look at each project individually, its compatibility, and all these different things. I think we've discussed a lot of these items, and we know what should and should not happen. We could dissect this thing forever, but I'm just saying is that we all know what good architecture is, and the massing and the scale and the experience are all part of it. And we're just falling short, and it's very difficult to do it in the basis of a formula.
But I agree, and I'm gonna tell you, the plaza, that project, I will venture to say, whoever was on the board of architects back then did not approve that project. We on this board did not approve that project. There was a city manager that has been long gone, okay, that has a street named after him in Sunrise, that stood at that door and looked at us like intimidating us to approve the project. And I say absolutely not. Okay, and that project got approved back then before, that project was, somebody say it was cooked before, that project was completely done before it got here, before it got to enter commission, before the Board of Architects. So, and I agree with you, and I have been a critic of that project. They have spent a lot of money and have some beautiful material, but I don't think that project, the massiveness of that project is what has caused a lot of residents to come out and speak against that project, speak against the Paseo de Rivera, and the one across the street from my office, whatever, Gables Station.
The big bucks.
Okay? So those have been the three that has,
Lit the fuse.
okay?
Tip the bucket, as they say.
So my question, Mr. City Attorney, does the Board of Architects have the right to deny bonuses if someone has met all the criteria?
So the board cannot act in an arbitrary and capricious manner. That's a general standard of all administrative bodies, that they cannot act arbitrarily and capricious. I don't like you, so I'm going to deny your application. That would be inappropriate. I want to point out one section.
So the answer is they do have the
They have to
ability, but you
have
get
to-
challenged legally if they do it capriciously.
Right. If they're completely arbitrary and capricious, they cannot attach a reason to their decision. I just wanted to point out under 6B about the preliminary Board of Architects review, it does indicate that the may grant, may approve with modifications, defer, or deny the application. They have the authority to do that. The only thing is what you asked is if they met every criteria and there's no basis for denying them their their bonus, can they say, well, you know, you met everything, but we're sorry, we're not going to give it to you. If they're acting arbitrary and capricious, then there is a review, as I recall, or an appeal of a Board of Architects review, is there not?
Yeah.
So obviously, they'll go to, I believe it's a special master that they go to, and they're going to bring up, hey, we met everything. There's no substantial competent evidence to support, just like you are required. When you make a decision, you're supposed to have substantial competent evidence. Well, you make a recommendation. You're supposed to have substantial competent evidence to support your recommendation. They're required to do the same.
So my question is, if Alan Morris had met every criteria for the Mediterranean bonus, but his building was denied, why?
Well, you know, the thing is, when you look at this criteria, there's a lot of discretion and judgment that goes into the criteria. So when something becomes a matter of judgment that's in there, because this is, you don't just check the boxes, there's judgment as to whether you met them. So in the judgment of the board, if they felt that he did not meet all the criteria, then they have the ability to deny it. And of course, Alan Morris, If he thinks they were acting arbitrary and capricious, he has the ability to appeal it.
But he was also upzoning the property. So it wasn't just the Mediterranean bonus, which is discretionary.
Sure, and they could, and one of the issues you look at in an upzoning is compatibility. It doesn't meet compatibility, and that's a decision that this board is supposed to
And
look
we
at.
did that on the first go-round.
Right,
It wasn't
absolutely.
compatible at 190 feet, and I remember clearly, we denied it 3 times.
And the Board of Architects also says compatibility with neighboring properties and uses. Right there.
So what direction, from what we're hearing right now,
I think, my opinion, Mr. Chairman, what I would like to do is ask a motion, basically telling staff that they're going in the right direction and that they have to refine it more and take our comments and try to incorporate as many as they can, where you
So-
whittle it down.
so you're saying, is that a deferral, or how do we?
Well,
If that's a motion that you
It
want to
would be a
make,
continuance, what I would be.
would it be a continuance?
Well, I'd like to ask staff, where are we? Is the board expecting this at the next commission meeting? Is there an urgency? Because we've had this once, we deferred it, then we didn't, then we had a small board, so we deferred it to a full board, and now we're here. Where are we as far as what the board is expecting?
The commission, you mean?
I'm sorry, the commission.
Well, I mean, the
I
commission's
live
anxious.
with a board of county commissioners. My apology.
The commission is
commission.
anxious like they always are, but I mean, if the board wishes to have the comments to implement into this draft of the revisions to the med design, we could do that.
Are we clear on what, is the board feel they've made clear to staff what additional changes they want to make? Because I've heard things like, well, there was some suggestion that this board, this board should hear it before the Board of Architects. So that's not before the board.
No.
That's.
Okay, so what are the things that staff has to go back and do? That's,
Felix, why don't you give us a list?
I'll give you a stab at it.
That could be dangerous.
Doesn't mean we have to accept them.
No.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the staff with these recommendations.
No, to continue until they rewrite it. It's a continuance until they rewrite it. They have to get as many of these things. I mean, there are a lot of things here that we discussed tonight that were much more specific than any other time.
Correct.
And I think it would be unfair to staff for them to, kind of polish it off. For example, if and maybe you could take a straw vote on different items if you wanted to do that, Mr. Chairman.
What I would suggest is just, it's your recommendation. So put in there the items that you feel we have discussed, and if any other board member would like to add anything to it that you haven't added, at that point, I think they can,
Okay.
as a friendly amendment, if there's a second,
But this would be for continuance anyway.
if that's that is what you're saying.
My recommendation is for continuance. I wouldn't feel comfortable.
so you're making a motion to continue, and you're going to list what you believe the criteria that staff need to address.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Continue, please.
We have a motion, do we get a?
Well,
second it.
I'd like to hear,
Okay.
actually, we do have a second, so let's
we can
hear
open
the
up for
items.
discussion.
Thank you.
He seconded, I'm sorry,
Javier
Javier
did,
seconded?
yes.
Kukawalinsky?
No.
But no, we don't have the complete motion.
We don't have the complete motion.
It's for discussion.
Right.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
But wait, so
I remembered everything you said. You want me to repeat it back?
No, I could say it backwards. I could say it backwards. There's no doubt in my mind. The way that it's written, I'm trying to follow, your requirements here. But I would say that the best thing is actually to look at your synopsis and follow the synopsis.
But it's also in the transcript, in the minutes that we have, that the court reporter is taking.
Correct.
From the discussion.
I would say one of the things that I specifically had mentioned was the two-part VOA review approach for the section 5102, which incorporates the design review standards, and then section 200, which are the med standards. Why is it important? Because you can't get to the med standards until you get the first component done. That would have been one of the much more different ways of approaching this. So that would have been one. Do you want to have a discussion about that first? Because that's a big one.
Well,
No, I like that.
You like that? Okay.
I mean, I'd rather you continue
Okay.
with what you have, and then I think staff's also going to go ahead and look at the minutes from the court reporter.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of discussion that took place.
The second one was the striking out of the site-specific, or usurping the site-specific zoning regulations that are mentioned at least 3 times in the med bonus component 502.
You say striking the site-specific?
Striking the portion that usurps the site specifics by simply qualifying as med bonus. In other words,
It trumps it.
right, leaving it the way it was always intended, which site specifics cannot be trumped, and the only way that they can be changed if they go back to the public hearing process that they were approved to begin with.
Usurp.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
yes, yeah, I agree.
I misspoke.
You said upsert.
No. Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
I agree.
So you're correct.
You're on a roll.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Does that include the blanket 150 feet that's throughout North Ponds and the CBD?
It would be that by the granting of med bonuses, it still is secondary to the site-specific properties and their conditions, which are in Appendix A, which consist of,
So you can't do a med bonus on top of the site specifics.
no.
On top of a zoning.
No, okay. The way that the code is written now, if you're granted med bonuses, you can trump site-specific. That's the way it's written now. I could read it to you if you would like.
I thought it was on top of what's
No,
allowed by the site specifics.
no.
What do you mean by trump? You mean
I mean
reduce the
that
setbacks or?
Rule it.
overrule something that normally went through a public hearing to get it approved.
Yeah,
No.
but is that just height? I'm assuming it's just height. It's
No,
not-
there are all sorts of things in, if you read the site specifics,
Right.
they have all sorts of restrictions, from uses to height to FAR, very, very specific things. And those site specifics have been part of the code forever.
Since the 1970s, yes.
I'm sorry?
Since the 70s, yes.
No, way before. Site specifics existed way before the 70s.
Okay.
Okay. And they're Appendix A, site-specific zoning regulations.
Right.
And they're in there by section and component, and then each one has its own merit. I'm just trying to make sure that something that we don't do that should have nothing to do with this, that one does not overrule the other one. In fact, the other way around.
We also have to be careful not to give a suggestion that rewrites the code.
No. This is not rewriting the code. It's actually taking out a component that should have never been put in the med bonus component of it.
What you're saying is nothing here will affect those site-specific properties.
Only those site-specific properties. You know,
Those are exempted from anything, whatever is written there
Right.
applies, and nothing else is
Exactly.
being affected.
I'm going to.
Now going to here.
Right. I'm going to use a fictitious example, the youth center. Maybe in 1930, they went to a public hearing and they approved it as a site-specific for the youth center only. Someone that's a city-owned property, just imagine if it wasn't. Then all of a sudden, you don't want to relinquish that. There is a mechanism. You'd have to go back to the commission to erase that agreement. So people rely on that agreement.
Like a covenant.
Exactly. That's why it's so important that we make sure that we protect that.
But if you take that example, if you take the example of a covenant, right now the commission can undo covenants.
That's correct.
So,
And I don't think you can write that the commission doesn't have the authority to
Correct.
modify.
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I'm saying if you wanted to overrule one of these site specifics, you have to go through a public hearing process.
So you're saying in order to take advantage of the med bonus, you have to rezone your property to whatever and basically abandon your site-specific benefits. Is that what you're saying?
Let me
Sorry.
read this to you, which is very specific.
Trying to see where it is in the changes. And I'm getting help with staff.
Under page 2 of the staff report.
Item number 3?
Page 2, item number 3.
Yes.
Site-specific zoning regulations and Mediterranean bonuses.
Right.
Coral Gables Mediterranean-style design standard bonuses / incentives as provided for in this section may be awarded as supplemental, additional, intensity / density, or reduction of existing limitations as assigned in Appendix A, site-specific zoning regulations. That is crazy. That should have never have been put in there. Because you can eliminate it, but you have to go through a hearing process. Because there were agreements probably made with neighbors and
Under a public process.
under a public process. How dare anyone say, just because it qualifies as Mediterranean bonus, that now you could wave a wand and say, it's not important anymore. You still have the process.
I was thinking more of, instead of going through such specific changes, I was thinking more of just all the comments that we made with suggestions to come back with the language as opposed to
Well,
stating the way you're stating it.
the reason, Mr. Chairman, that I bring it up is because this is very specific to the Mediterranean bonus.
Okay.
And that has nothing to do with the price of tea in China. As far as the protection of 70 some odd pages of listed properties in under Appendix A that has been there forever. I think it's a protection that exists, but if there's enough of a will for someone to say, we want to eliminate this because it was maybe archaic or it's run its course, we could go through the proper channels of going through a public hearing. It's almost the same as changing a plat. There's a process to change a plat. There's a very specific process. Just imagine if that plat process now can be changed simply because now a particular property qualifies for Mediterranean bonus, which on top of everything else is discretionary.
So the way you would have it read would be that Mediterranean bonuses shall not apply to site-specific zoning.
No.
And that if you want if you want Mediterranean bonus, you need to rezone your site-specific to the underlying zone.
No,
Okay.
I would simply strike out, you can have Mediterranean bonus on something that has site-specific. What you can't do is take the site-specific restriction out of that property. That doesn't mean you can't apply for Mediterranean bonus. What they have done is
But what
that
you're saying, if there's a site-specific that says you can't have more than 50 feet,
you can't sell liquor. You can't sell liquor. It was site-specific. You can't sell liquor on this property.
But I don't know if I agree with that.
Well,
I mean, I'm just,
no, I was wanting to make sure
Well, no, if
that
it's
I understood
site-specific
what it
and you
is.
can't be more than 3 stories, and Mediterranean makes it 4 stories.
So you can't have that, because
No.
your
That's what I think he's talking
site-specifics
something more
are
like that.
3 stories, so you can't exceed the site-specifics. Would that be an example?
That could be an example. I don't know. What has been done is just a blanket erasing simply for qualifying for something that is
but
subjective.
those weren't all, I don't know if that falls within the comments that everybody made and we made here as to how to guide them. I think what I'm hearing from you is you want to be very specific in what to strike out from the code or from wherever it is, because it should or should not be there.
The reason, Mr. Chairman, the reason I think this is so important is because unless staff has gone through all 77 pages of every one of those properties to see what the restriction that exists there is, I just find it incredible that this was added there, where it simply just erases all of these site-specific standards, which are zoning standards. These are part of the zoning standards under Appendix A. And how can you do that? Because we are discussing specifically.
Felix, let's just go back to basics. Why are we here? Why is this brought before us? To me, this is brought before us because the Board of Architects or whatever the powers are saying buildings are being designed and given the Mediterranean bonuses when these buildings are not really Mediterranean in style. Am I wrong?
No.
will say
And
this.
you're
I think-
100%
As to the
right.
scope that's before us?
But you're 100% right. The thing is that because it is a Mediterranean bonus that does this, as far as negating the site-specific standards that normally went through public hearings, I just think that they're hand in hand. They're not one or the other.
But I think that language should be brought back to us. In other words,
Separately?
As different.
yeah, I just
fine.
don't.
And I don't, by the way, I don't disagree with you, but I don't know if this is.
I just don't know if that's within the scope of what we're here right now. We can make a recommendation that language should be brought back or something, but I just don't see that as to the way it was brought before us tonight.
This, the way that this was surgically inserted, for me, it is very suspicious. And I think it's a mistake that this doesn't get taken care of now that we're looking at the Mediterranean bonuses, because it's specifically triggered once it's a Mediterranean bonus. So I'll let it go, Mr. Chairman. I'll let it go, but I'm going to bring it up privately to whomever it is that is willing to listen, because I think this is a very dangerous prediction. And in fact, there's always a big bugaboo that we hear from the city attorney to make sure that we don't get sued, et cetera. If I lived next door to something that had a site-specific, and the city granted a Mediterranean bonus and changed something there, I would sue the city in a New York minute.
And is that in the
And
code?
I'd probably win.
And that's in the code right now? We're not changing the code by your,
No, we're going to leave this independently
But
under
that's
something,
right.
which is fine.
But that's part of a recommendation.
yeah, well, we're
Give to them, but not
Yeah.
necessarily write it or dictate what should or should not be removed. To me, it should be more, look, the board feels that this is wrong the way it's written. So
I just want to ask staff, this language wasn't actually changed, it was just updating how you change the tables and things. This,
Correct, yeah.
right. So I think this might be beyond the scope of the title, but I think you could, as a recommendation, say the board should look at med bonus as it applies to site specifics.
correct.
And you can include that when you ultimately decide on this item. You can say, separate and apart, the board should look at how med bonus applies to site specifics.
Chairman, would it be possible for me to render an opinion? Because I think this is really important, right? So we as the board, staff put this together, we as the Board of Architects reviewed it, right? But I would have to say, myself included, I mean, all of the zoning nuances are not something I think that we as a Board of Architects really understand. So it may be that this needs to be workshopped as we did at the board on an architectural level. It should be workshopped from a planning and zoning level and the implication. Because I can tell you that I had no understanding of whatsoever. So, I mean, I think it's a great point, and maybe it's a workshop, because I don't know how long this
9
would
o'clock.
take tonight to go word by word.
No, and for-
That's what I'm saying is
And,
just
and I
make a
get it,
recommendation.
but for example, for me, area replat height of townhouses shall be limited to 45 feet. There was this, for it to be site-specific and not in the zoning code, there was an agreement with people that went before the commission that got this into the code. Who is protecting me if I'm the neighbor? And now someone comes in with a pad that says I'm going 60 feet. Wait a minute. Oh, I got Mediterranean bonus, so therefore I can abuse that.
No, you can. No,
Yes.
no, you can't, because the site specific doesn't allow you to do that.
No, Robert, the thing is that the way that it's written in the bonus, if you're granted the bonus, you could do whatever you want with that.
No, as long as the land use and zoning supports it.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure Almeria Row is not zoned to be
That-
high-rise. I'm sure it's
That's the underlying factor.
low-density residential.
I don't understand.
There's land use and there's zoning, and they cap height. The both of them cap the height. You can't have site specifics beyond what you're allowed to have for the underlying zoning and land use.
But the land use, we're talking about the site specifics.
Yes, but the land use doesn't support it, if land use only is capped at
With the amount of
45
change,
feet,
with the amount of changes of zoning that there have been over the last few years, last couple of decades, let's say, I am sure that there have been changes of zoning that have occurred on properties where the underlying site-specific was never looked at.
and typically they remove the site specific. They remove their property from the site specifics that's listed in Appendix A.
I'm telling you right now, there's absolutely no business for that being there. I'm going to defer to the chairman. I'll continue if you'd like.
I mean, for me, I like to have, my thought was to have more, at this stage, an understanding of what the comments were and the feel of what the board was looking at, as opposed to being more specific and rewriting with the language or the actual.
Because if we're gonna do that, Judy's right, we're gonna go past 9 o'clock. This is gonna take,
I mean, this is more of a workshop type thing, if that's what we want to look at. I'm not saying, Felix, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm really not. What I'm saying is, I don't think it's part of what's before us at this point. We can make a recommendation, and we can make a recommendation for a workshop, and we can make a recommendation to look at it.
and to me, I think that the staff is gonna have the transcript of what we did today, and they should go back for us to give them, repeat everything that we did, that we said tonight.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay? I think, I
actually
don't know
like your idea.
if you have enough to say, I'm gonna go back, take that information, and try to come back to you guys with a revised document that incorporates our comments. I think that may be a lot more productive.
And possibly instead of a strikeout or so forth with those comments, maybe putting it in red so it stands out and you say, these are the changes that came back from this meeting.
Yeah, like in the memo we did today.
Right. Mr. Chairman, jumping forward, the formulas that were brought up by Robert, I agree that the formulas and the best practices should be reviewed completely, starting on page 8, right?
Right. I think-
Going
I thought we were
on.
going to just allow the transcript stand
No.
as is. But
He's
wanna
making
do
a
it.
big statement. This is not specific, but you're right. That's part of the comments that we made.
That's
And
correct.
those should be looked at, so when they come
I
back.
just picked up, I moved
I
on.
was trying to make,
No, I moved on to the next set of comments, which were the formulas. The formulas don't work. They haven't been tested. Either test them or strike out the formulas. So that's on page 8. That's also on page 10.
Formulas of the golden section and the other proportion
On
systems.
page 10, for multifamily buildings, the following about the porches, 8 feet, the stoop, 3 feet, the finished floor, 18 inches, the porches, stoops, 5 feet. You know, it's a formula based, and I think Robert had also mentioned on the 8, on the best practices, that he was having a difficult time, and so was I, on a formula-based thing where it's very, very strict, and there isn't a lot of discretion on being able to move those numbers, correct, Robert?
At least not without the benefit of doing the exercise.
Correct, which is test the formula, right? So then the next item, and by the way, also on page 14, on the testing, on the center line of the open bays, et cetera, that's also on page 14. And there were more formulas on page 13 on the bottom.
And if I can interject on page 14, I think there's a typo. Under MX3, 10,000, you have 14 stories that would equal 83.5 feet. I think that's a typo, isn't it? It should be 163.5 feet, right? 14 stories? And you've got it down as 83.5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a typo there.
Second to the last there, yeah.
Oh, those would be short stories.
Digits.
And by the way, the other thing is, if I may, the other thing is that Chip made the point about whether it's a weighted system or not.
Correct.
Right, okay. You know, one of the examples that Chip was talking about is sustainability. If you have sustainability, you're going to get the same point for.
Felix, would you be okay just saying that for staff to read the transcript as opposed to going, because.
Oh, no, I was just doing a general to help everyone as far, very, very general. I'm almost done if you'd like. And by the way, we did not discuss this, Mr. Chairman, on page 18, the developer shall contribute 1% of the aggregate project. In case they can't make a park or land acquisition or whatever, they contribute 1%. I think that should really be studied, where our art in public places has been used very differently than the original intention, where it's been turned over to developers, and sometimes that doesn't work well.
Okay.
And now it was just brought into for parks. That's on the top of page 18. I thought that is something that is a red flag.
So I guess you stand to reason if you're trading a park, you're no longer donating to art in public places? Is that what
No, I'm sorry. It's very similar. As you recall,
Right.
when the county passed it, that we had the 1%. So the city would get the money, and then they would deem we're going to put this in a public right of way, we're going to do this. Now, you have the developer saying, oh, I'm going to bring in this piece of art from, from this artist somewhere, or actually, we're going to rip it out of the ground and bring it over here and then try to fix it up some, and then put it in here, and now they don't have to donate the 1% of the aggregate cost. So this is almost like the same template, the same blueprint for the same thing for now parks. So now you give 1%, and I don't know what the value is. It's like,
Yeah,
what?
but Felix, you gotta start looking at 1% for public, art,
Right.
1% for open space. There is a limitation where.
Oh, no, I'm not.
You're gonna be extracting from.
No, what I'm saying is, I'd rather have the open space provided by the developer. I don't want the 1%. I don't know what I can get with 1% of the aggregate value of a normal development. It probably is nothing,
Is this
When-
open space fund a new concept?
That is, of course it is a new
That
concept.
flagged in the,
Yeah, we discussed it. It's part of the, if you
Is it in
meet
the
6 of the
title?
12, or
Came out of left field.
how many there are. It's not required.
Yeah,
it's not required.
Right.
no.
It's part
right.
of the.
This came out of left field. And this is one of the things where you get the check off to be able to
Oh,
get
I
the
see.
bonus.
It's one, oh, it's
One of the,
But,
it's optional.
but we weren't fine tuning anything, so now,
But it's not something they're required to do. It's one of the options that you can.
one of the check
which
marks to
didn't
get the bonus.
exist, which we didn't even discuss here tonight because we didn't get there. So I'm sorry I brought it up, but I brought it up
I'm glad you
because
did.
it was important.
Look, I think,
That's about it, eh?
well, there's a lot, I'm sure it's gonna be more, once we go through it, that we're gonna encounter that needs to further get defined. This is not, and I think Julio, this is, you don't do this in one day. Okay?
or two or three.
So we're gonna have to go back, and if the commission is in a hurry to pass this, well, they're gonna bypass us and take, this approach. But I think for me to support this, we have to do a lot more work.
Oh, yeah.
So, we have a motion,
No, that's it, and that was the,
and we have the second.
right.
Is there any other comment? Yes.
Just a question of housekeeping. Generally, actions by the board are defined by the majority of the members of the board. It
Yes.
just needs to be made clear.
Well-
It just says the board.
Right, before need to be an affirmative vote.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to take a vote on it. Any other comments? No? So hopefully we're clear. Call the roll, please.
I'm sorry, could you read the motion first? I want to make sure
We're deferring it to the next meeting, correct?
Or whenever it's
Or
ready.
whenever they're
they're
ready.
ready.
Just says,
And what the motion, there was a motion, with suggestion that they go back to the transcripts and look at that and come back to us based on the comments that
They may-
taking 2 hours or more.
They may not be ready at the next meeting.
well, I didn't know if we needed a date certain, or you're renoticing when,
I
okay.
think it's best to
Okay.
renotice this.
Oh, yeah, that's what.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Sue Karolinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. Thank you.
Through the chair, may I suggest that we take a break for 5 minutes and extend our time to 9:15?
No.
Or do you think we can
Take a
finish?
break and then
Okay, then that's fine.
Oh,
we got one item left.
which
I
is
understand.
the canal.
Well, I'm going to go use the canal, be right back.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
What's the last?
draft agenda.
But in that neighborhood, you see the neighborhood, all the signs on the front yard.
All right. Let's,
Should we read the last item, Mr. Chairman?
well, before we read the last item, we have to have a motion to either extend our time, or if not, it's going to get deferred to the next meeting.
I have a motion to extend the time 15 minutes.
So we have a motion to extend. Is there,
Question to staff, can we finish this presentation in less than 10 minutes?
It's one PowerPoint. It's one slide, sorry. If you don't know where the Mahi Canal is, there's just one slide that shows you where it is.
I think this can be done in 5 minutes.
I think so too. Yes.
all right, do we have a motion to extend by 10 minutes the meeting?
What did I say 15? I already put a motion on for 15.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
hear it. So 15. So
And we
5
can
more
go
minutes,
shorter,
it's
but
15?
15.
We have a second? Everybody in favor, say aye.
Let me read this first.
No also, but
Okay.
it passes.
Item F1. All right, item F1, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code, Article 15, notices, Section 15-102 notice, to require notice to all properties along the Mahi Canal, regardless of distance, for any new mixed-use and multifamily developments on the Mahi Canal, providing for repeal of revision, severability clause, codification, providing for an effective date. Item F1, public hearing.
Thank you.
So, Director Garcia, planning official. So this is adding in one sentence, a long sentence, at the end of our notice requirements. So I have one slide to show where the Mahi Canal is. So it's in between US 1 and the Coral Gables Canalway. It's the only canalway that has mixed use and significant multifamily uses on it. This request came from the Waterways Advisory Board to request that the entire canal have mail notice, like everybody else, within 1,000 or 1,500 feet, depending on the request, that they would receive the mail notice and be involved in the process. That's it.
Okay. Do we have any speakers for this item
No, we don't.
in any of the platforms?
No.
Let's go ahead and close it to speakers. Does anybody?
I have a question. What is the distances from the property again that you have?
It's 1,000 feet for a site plan approval, but it's 1,500 feet if you're changing the land use and zoning.
And what is the distance between, let's say, the Mahi Canal and US 1?
To the end.
To the end, it's a little over 6,000 feet.
6,000?
Yes, linear feet, yes.
So just explain one thing to me. What, if something happens in any of those projects,
No, only for mixed use and multifamily projects.
so something
Not
happens
single-family
on
docks
US
or
1,
anything.
the person that lives 6,000 feet away has to get notified.
Correct. The way it's prepared today, yes.
Everything that's in the red.
Right.
And what's the purpose of it? I'm just curious.
Can I ask a question? It would have to be US 1, or if it's adjacent to the Mahi Canal?
Except for the US 1. There's one.
Right.
Right.
Project, and the only way you can do the mixed-use project is the US 1.
Oh.
And on
got it.
Caballero, and in South Alhambra,
Where?
on South Alhambra and Caballero.
South,
On US 1, South Alhambra and Caballero, that's mixed use.
South Seas, yeah.
where the pink is.
Right, where it's zoned
Right.
right now,
Yeah.
mixed use and multifamily.
So it's not just US 1.
Well,
No, but
okay,
it's
right.
only that. Right.
Abutting in Caballero. Essentially, it's where Paseo de Rivera is, all,
Right, and it extends twice as far on South Alhambra.
but all the way to,
I still don't, can I ask a question? It requires to be, are the pink areas adjacent to the Mahi Canal?
Yes, yes, they are.
They are?
They're abutting.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Only those two pink areas, not any other pink area, only if it falls within the canal.
Oh,
Correct.
right.
Right. I just wanted to clarify.
Right, properties adjacent to the canal, correct? Right.
Abutting, yes.
And I just need to ask, and maybe, what's what's the purpose to notify the person on the canal at the other end? I understand it's residential, and if there's a project and they want to come before the board, and everything's posted and advertised. But what's the purpose to notify the person on the very end of the canal that is on Granada?
So again, I'm taking this request from the commission, who heard it from the Waterways Advisory Board. I think the concern is that it's a limited amount of canal. It's the only canal that really has commercial uses on it, and they feel that during construction or during commercial uses that they could potentially impact the canal, and everyone on the canal wants to be notified of any changes that might trigger any impacts.
Plus, I believe, that's people's backyards. Right now, there's a lot of boat traffic as it is there, okay? And I think the neighbors are concerned that there's going to be a marina at the end, which will increase the boat traffic in their backyards, right?
But the marina is there now.
Right,
It's currently there.
right.
They're
right.
not nobody's going to be allowed to increase.
They feel with the commercial is that
know.
Oh, absolutely, because you don't get, in South Florida, you don't get, more, usage.
But is it marina even legally there now?
right. It's not even legal.
It's what?
It's not a legal- it's not a legal marina.
No, they have,
You're saying a public marina where,
there's not a marina. You could dock boats along the seawall. And you're allowed to do that today with like 30-something boats, legally.
But who, are those public slips?
No, they're private slips
Can we bring it back up?
by
Sorry.
by the property, adjacent property.
Can we bring it back up?
I
I'm
could tell
sorry.
you because I looked at this property 12, 14 years ago myself. Okay, actually, I had it under contract, and that property have the right to 33 slips along the seawall, only for them, not for public use. So those are there today. It's not like they're gonna bring a marina. You're never gonna. I could tell you what I was told by the guy from up in Tallahassee when they, in your lifetime, you're not gonna get any more slips. What I was looking at before. Here is the same case. You're never gonna get any more slips allowed there. So whatever is there now, they cannot increase it.
But if the usage increases, because there are not 30 boats parked there right now. In fact, I haven't seen any boats parked back there. But if a development comes in and they all of a sudden start selling those slips to the unit owners, there's 30 boats that currently aren't there right now that will be passing in back of everybody's backyard.
But
Isn't that their right?
but you're,
Yeah, I'm not saying it's their right or it's not their right. I'm saying that this motion is for people to be notified of what's happening what might be happening in their backyard so that they can come for public comment.
or 6,000 feet away, 4 times what is the typical protocol in the city?
Because this is not a circle. This is a line. That's where the 6,000 feet comes. It's not a circle like we normally have.
if you do,
Right?
if you do a Google map without the curve, what's the distance from the furthest house to the point on US 1?
Oh, you measured it, 6,000 feet, 6,000 linear feet
It's
from US
6,000
1,
linear feet,
including the
not-
curve and all the way down to the other canal.
It's not 6,000.
That's what Google Earth said.
I live there.
There were some, I should point out,
6,000 feet from US 1 to the.
To Granada.
bridge there, to the bridge.
Moving along the
where
curve,
Granada-
yes.
Where Granada intersects the waterway right there. That's where Granada comes out. That's where Granada ties into that canal, right?
Yes.
That's a mile. Over a
A
mile.
little over a mile, yes.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. It actually could be. But either way, those 30 spaces that are there now, if those 30 spaces that are there now, if a project goes there, would they not be allowed to have those 30, if they don't
Yes.
come before us, would they not automatically be allowed those 30 spaces? Mr. Attorney?
I don't know, are they allowed those spaces that it's a
I
matter
think
of
this one, they
right.
have permits with the county for those slips. But again, this is really just for noticing.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah,
I think
I live in that, I live there. So the neighbors are very, very concerned about what might be going, and they want to be sure they know what's going to be going in. So they want to be noticed so they can attend public meetings, have input.
You would think the neighbors that aren't on the waterway would want to know also.
Well,
Well,
the
they
most
will know.
affected are going to be on the waterway. That's why the waterway board said we would like it noticed. I mean, we have one board already that's saying, and has listened to the residents, and they said, let's move forward with this. So I have a motion to approve as this item, if there's no other discussion.
Before we have a motion, would anybody like to just say anything from the board without me asking individual people to comment? Yes.
I'm trying to justify in my mind what makes this so unique. I mean, you said 1,000 or 1,500 feet, depending on the type of change, correct?
Correct.
That takes us about about halfway between US 1 and, midway between Granada and US 1.
Yeah, but
That's a
it's
long
not,
way.
It's not a circle.
No, but it's a half circle. Let's say it's a U shape.
But
It's not.
either
no,
way,
you-
it's a-
don't look at this. Look at what a circle is. 1,500 times. If that's
Yeah, well, most of that circle is going to be UM and UM's housing, so that's not
no,
to worry
I
about
mean
that circle.
UM's not part of the waterway. It's
I
not-
know, I'm just talking about normal notification you would have to provide.
Yeah, in a circle.
In a circle.
In a circle.
From US 1, from one of those two sites on US 1, takes you 1,500 feet, takes you about a quarter of the way from that distance. So we're looking at like 10 or 12 lots plus most of about a quarter of the houses in that section. I just trying to, it's not like a remote situation where they're not going to notice.
Are we setting a precedence?
And I'm afraid that's what we're going to be doing. I can't see why it's a special condition that requires extra notice. That's what I can't get my head around.
Well, I think it's because there's water in back of these properties.
Well, there's water behind a lot of properties.
Can we just ask the
Well-
question? I'd like to just ask a question to the council.
I reviewed an ordinance that was drafted by staff where I was concerned we need to explain why this notice is different from all other notices.
And while we have canals that run through our city, this is the only canal that has mixed use or significant multifamily uses on it that's zoned that, right? Most other canals all have single family, some have duplex.
Just one more thing, Mr. Chairman. We have endangered species in that canal.
Okay.
And these people that live there, that have their boats on the back of their canal, are impact. You know, they have a relationship, and they have to guard, those resources. In other words, the manatees that live there. And there are very similar situations in the canals in Marco Island, where the people that own property have a responsibility.
I'm having the same issue as Javier. What is this? I understand all that. They have the right for those slips today. They're not increasing. Just because they don't have whatever, 10, 30 boats there now. What is the difference? Why is this so special that it requires all the way to the end that is not anywhere else?
I just don't see what the harm is in the notification.
Right, not only that.
It's not the other way around.
And
I
it's
think-
not only 30 boat slips, it's boat traffic increased in general. Traffic is going to increase in general, not just slipped boats, but boat traffic in general. If the multifamily is
Guys,
developed.
it's one person at a time only for the court reporter.
I have a boat. Am I not allowed to navigate those waters today? Yes.
As long as you fit underneath those bridges.
Yeah, okay. I'm allowed to navigate those waters.
Right.
So the argument of the increase in traffic and there is, to me, is not a valid.
But this is about noticing. So if there is a project that will increase the boat traffic, those residents have a right to know how and why the boat traffic is going to be increased and have an opportunity to input on anything that is going in there.
So Robert, if they put a use such as a restaurant at the end, and now, you've got a big boat, you could go in there, that's one boat. But now you have personal watercraft, 20 people. They could go up there, they take very little space. They've impacted this completely. It's very unusual because it's a waterway, and it's the waterway that leads to commercial, and the commercial will attract, they live off that, will attract uses that are going to increase the intensity.
Jennifer, at that project right now, can a restaurant open at that very end?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Today?
Yes.
Do they have to come before us to open a
Depends on the
restaurant
size
there?
of it. I mean, there's an existing building right there, so if
Let's say they want to open a Monty's, not that big, 30
right, there's
seats.
restaurants there right now. There's a
Okay.
deli that's there right now.
But
There's a sandwich shop there.
Yes.
I've been there.
But if
good.
if personal watercrafts want to go there now, they can go there now to that sandwich shop.
Let's think of it in a different way. This is one of the most unusual places that there is here in the city. Let's say now, because of the commercial use, Chip over here wants to put up a sightseeing business with shelling. And now he has shelling with pontoon boats. You can make a lot of money off that.
rent paddle boats, I could rent.
Guys, we got 5 minutes.
Completely different. This is a very unique site, and it's going to impact everyone up to that turn where the waterway, the Mahi waterway gets bigger.
Look, there's a motion.
Along that logic,
There's a-
then we'd have to go all the way down to hit the ocean because they're going to impact all the people on the Coral Gables
No,
waterway,
I
right?
said to the intersection where the waterway is.
No, but under your logic, how the boat's going to get there? They're not going to be dropped by parachute. They're going to go up the Coral Gables waterway underneath the Lejeune Bridge.
All the way from the bay.
So it's about where do we end this?
Gentlemen, we do have a motion by Sue.
I'll second it.
We have a second. Is there any comment?
My comment is that I would be more willing to go up to Minota.
Oh, listen, we have a motion.
We have a
second.
motion
Call the
and we
roll.
have a second. Any other comment? Call the roll, please.
Chip Withers?
Yep.
Javier Salman?
No.
Felix Pardo?
Yes.
Sue Kawalinski?
Yes.
Robert Behar?
No.
A.B. Eisenstadt?
No.
Okay, so you have the opportunity for a reverse motion, otherwise it goes without a recommendation. It's a 3-3 vote. If anybody desires to make a reverse motion.
To me, I feel all the neighbors are going to show up for the project, whether you're on the canal or you're not on the canal with what's going on. That's why, I just want you to know, that's why I voted that way. I don't
Well,
think they notice.
you
I'm
know, I
afraid of
think-
setting a precedence. We've got 3 minutes before we sunset. Does anybody want to go ahead and make a motion to extend?
I don't, but I just want to say, we have to be for the residents, and this is one of those that we should be for the residents and notify them as much as possible. It doesn't affect anything at all, except it does goodwill for the residents who are going to have to live with increased boat traffic.
I'm sure it'll pass the commission.
Anybody want to
Okay, so
extend?
There's no other motion, so
Well, we need-
3-3 is a tie, and it goes as no recommendation.
Do you want to accept something that is less than, like Javier
I
suggested?
would really take it to Minota.
No? Okay.
No, I mean, I wouldn't, I mean,
Okay.
and then the people on
Then-
the other side are going to say, why
Look,
didn't we get
had a roll
noticed?
call. It goes to commission with no recommendation. Since nothing else, Mr. Sherman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. So adjourned. All in favor, say aye.
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 Correct.